Chapter 507. Time flew by, and before he knew it, another half a month had passed through his fingers. Dustless also sat quietly in Mariewa for half a month. He thought that the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, with constipated faces would immediately stage the prelude to the conspiracy, but there was no movement for half a month. It was like a stone falling into the sea suddenly calmed down, as if it had never happened. Not only was Mariewa extremely calm, but the whole world had an unprecedented dead silence, and even things like pirates attacking marines from time to time became rare. It seemed that everything was due to the deterrence of the 7 warlords of the sea. The whole world was restored to peace, and the calm was like the stagnant water under the deep sea. Coincidentally, very soon, there was a world-shaking event that happened all of a sudden. 2 days ago, 100 Beast Kaido's fleet inexplicably fought with Gecko Moria's pirates. Both sides were top pirates, and for a time, the sea was stained with blood, attracting countless sea kings. Surprisingly, Gecko Moria and 100 Beast Kaido were evenly matched, and the losses on both sides were maintained at the same stage. Of course, this was the case when Kaido himself did not join in. Perhaps in his eyes, Gecko Moria was just a clown, not worthy of him to do it himself. However, the next day, 100 Beast Kaido couldn't help but do it himself. The loss was small, but the face was big. He almost wiped out most of Gecko Moria's fleet in a crushing manner. Although Gecko Moria was arrogant, he was not an idiot. In the face of the fierce Yonko, 4 emperors, Kaido, he chose to temporarily avoid the edge. A wise man does not fight when the odds are against him. He still understood this simple truth. Where there is life, there is hope. He can make a comeback in the future. Now, he has to fight with the madman Kaido, and there is only a dead end in the future. Gecko Moria is quite smart. He is not stupid enough to fight with Kaido. That monster with the same body shape as a bat is so cunning. It must be true that you can't judge a book by its cover. Smacking his lips, Dustless looked at Moonlight Moria in a new light. According to the secret information obtained from White Zetsu, Gecko Moria did not retreat, but retreated in order to advance. He set a trap and waited for 100 Beast Kaido to get in. In other words, Gecko Moria was just deliberately showing weakness before. You could have just run away. Why did you have to give up the last of your belongings? Shaking his head, Dustless disagreed with Gecko Moria's strategy. 100 Beast Kaido and Moria were not in the same dimension at all. Even if he set a trap in advance, it would not change the reality of the fiasco. In the face of absolute power, all schemes and machinations were fleeting clouds. One was one of the 4 emperors who ruled the world, while the other was just a clown who had just risen to fame. As he stretched lazily, a strange voice suddenly spread in his mind. Only Ling, the embodiment of the system consciousness, had this ability. That horned woman wants to see you. A voice that made one feel relaxed and happy spread out like the sound of nature. Only Dustless could hear it, and it was filled with an indescribable magical power that calmed down his heart that had been going up and down. A woman with horns on her head? You're not talking about Kaguya, are you? Dustless's mouth twitched, and he asked speechlessly. He could not help but have goosebumps all over his body, and there were black lines hanging on his forehead. Dustless was curious about the strange horns on Kaguya's head. He only touched it slightly, and she chased him all over the world. Looking for me? Could it be that she has thought it through and intends to give herself to me? Thinking of Kaguya's indifferent, arrogant character, Dustless shook his head and sighed. Every time they met in the system world, the first opponent was her. Decisively waving his hand to refuse, Dustless was about to refuse Ling's proposal, but the latter wrinkled her nose with some dissatisfaction. The 5-year lucky draw cycle is coming to an end, don't you realize? Ling's voice was a little reproachful. This kind of thing was not up to her to worry about. Dustless became a hands-off shopkeeper, and everything was handed over to her personally. Hearing this, he couldn't help but think of the lucky draw that was carried out only a few months ago, and he subconsciously said, the last lucky draw time seems to be a few months ago. Isn't it once every 5 years? Dustless still remembered that after taming Hawkeye, he immediately returned to Mariewa for the lucky draw. The contents included Gate of Babylon and a mysterious light fruit. It was only a few months now. There is no mistake in the time. Until today, there has been a 20-year deadline, but you have only done it 3 times. As a system, Ling naturally can't make such a mistake. So I have to add new abilities again? A smile appeared on the handsome face, and he seemed to think of something, and then his expression became stiff. The lucky draw is carried out in the world of the system. Kaguya, the old woman who caught him, will come to trouble him again. Although Dustless is confident that he can defeat her, or even seal her again, but no matter what, they have already been husband and wife. Dustless can't do such a thing. He can be cruel to the enemy, but as for people like Kaguya who have a relationship with him, it's another matter. A mysterious force quietly spread out, and regardless of whether Dustless agreed or not, Ling directly pulled Dustless into the space of the system by brute force. The spacetime in front of him suddenly changed and turned into a blue starry sky, surrounded by flowers and trees, full of the fresh smell of nature. The beautiful figure who had been waiting for a long time suddenly reflected in Dustless's face. A white Taoist robe, with several black tomo in front of it, silver hair dancing in the wind, and white eyes like the chaos at the beginning of the world. Looking closely, it was Otsutsuki Kaguya. Unlike in the past, Kaguya did not launch a surprise attack at this moment, but looked at Dustless with a complicated look, and there was a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. Seeing this scene, Dustless was speechless for a while. The fierce tiger suddenly became a soft sheep. It was really not suitable. Chapter 508. Her silver hair fluttered in the wind, and her long hair was filled with an elegant fragrance. The smell wasn't very strong and was relatively light. It was the kind that Dustless liked the most. At this moment, Huey was completely different from before. Her cold temperament that rejected people thousands of miles away was restrained, and she blended into nature. She was abnormally gentle and approachable. Usually, when Dustless saw her, there would be a boulder that weighed a few thousand kilograms behind him. This was all due to the majestic chakra's deterrence. But now, there was no such suppression. Dustless couldn't help but sigh. The sun must have risen from the west today. It's really strange. There seems to be something wrong with her. Dustless raised his eyebrows and said in puzzlement. After a moment of silence, Dustless finally couldn't help but be curious. A trace of energy spread out from his body as he quietly observed the changes in Huey. Unknowingly, it gave Wu Chen a very strange feeling. As for the specifics, he also could not describe it. In short, this was an unprecedented experience. What a strange detection method. Is this the power you learned in this world? With a slight thought, ripples appeared in the void in front of him, turning into an invisible defensive wall, preventing Dustless from probing. They all went around Huey. Her eyes were as calm as spring water as she looked at Dustless calmly. Huey was no longer as raging as before. The her in front of him gave people a feeling of extraordinarily tranquility. That domineering aura of being isolated from the world had faded a lot. The impression she gave to Dustless was that she had a lot more human-like gentleness. How is the outside world? Is it the same as our previous world? Huey asked expectantly with a light voice that soothed one's heart. Her eyes were filled with hope and yearning. The supreme celestial voice was pleasing to the ear, causing people to be intoxicated and unable to extricate themselves. After being stunned for a few seconds, Dustless nodded and revealed a faint smile. The Huey in front of him was refreshing. Perhaps this was the real her after taking off her cold exterior. It's as colorful as the previous world, Dustless replied after a moment of contemplation. Dustless continued to observe Huey from the corner of his eyes. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. There seemed to be a mysterious existence that used an unknown demonic art to unite his heart with Huey G's. They could hear each other's thoughts. How fascinating. A look of longing appeared on Huey's face before her eyes dimmed. Dustless was the only one who could enter and exit this iron-like world. Everyone else was forever locked in this world. The simple word exit was as heavy as Mount Tai to Kaguya. It was just an extravagant hope. It was so far away that it seemed boundless. Seeing this scene, Dustless felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. Huey's dejected expression was forever imprinted in his heart. Dustless opened his mouth. Just as he was about to consider making an agreement with Huey G and letting her leave this world, the latter's figure disappeared into the boundless world. Only Wu Chen was left in the original place. How strange, where did my energy fluctuations come from? After a while, Dustless's brows were tightly knitted together, revealing an incredulous expression. How could it not be strange that his chakra fluctuations suddenly came from Huey G's body? It was very weak for the time being, and because of Huey G's deliberate concealment, Dustless's chakra fluctuations were weak to the point that they were negligible. Even so, he was still keenly aware of it. It shouldn't be. Thinking of a ridiculous possibility, Dustless's face directly froze, and his face was full of disbelief. He and Yulua had been together for a long time, but he had never felt such a strange intimacy that was close to being connected by blood. The sudden appearance of complex emotions gave Dustless a headache. That's indeed your energy fluctuations. An ethereal voice suddenly sounded, and a cool breeze came head-on, rolling up waves of wind, and arrived at Dustless's side. This untouchable cool breeze turned from nothingness to reality and condensed into Ling-Er's body. You should know what this means, right? No longer as indifferent as before, she teased Dustless with a bit of playfulness. Dustless was silent, his eyes looking at the void where Huey G disappeared. Such a simple and clear reason, he naturally understood what it meant. The irrefutable evidence didn't allow him to quibble. Don't tell me you don't want to admit it? Her black eyes circled around Dustless as Ling-Er asked bluntly. Her tone was stern as she questioned Dustless. Dustless just rolled his eyes when he heard that, then he shook his head. At first, Dustless thought it was a product created by Huey G using the yin-yang escape to cheat his sympathy. But combined with her abnormality and that chakra fluctuation, it was definitely natural. That spontaneous feeling of being connected by blood was even more impossible for it to be a lie. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. Dustless casually sat on the ground and looked at the blue void with a myriad of emotions. Ripples appeared in his heart that had been calm for many years, and his spotless Tao heart also quietly changed. Quietly staring at the void where Huey G disappeared, her unique scent still remained in the air. Dustless closed his eyes and carefully savored that mysterious and intimate fluctuation. Recalling the little bits of the past with Huey G, Dustless then had a headache. Maybe this little life that suddenly appeared could improve the grudge between him and Huey G, but it was bound to cause other karma. Even so, Dustless's mouth still curved up, and it was still obvious, revealing a smile like a spring breeze. Life was originally tangled up. The affairs of the world are unpredictable. I think you don't mean what you say. Ling-Er's clear eyes glanced at him. Even if Dustless concealed it perfectly, she could still see the joy in his heart. To be honest, not only Dustless, but she also felt very surprised. Life was indeed the most magical product derived from the universe. It was unpredictable, and when it should come, it was useless to stop it. Moreover, Ling couldn't imagine how strong a young life form would be if it possessed both Dustless and Huey's power at the same time. Automatic. Chapter 509. It was not difficult to imagine how unprecedented the future of the offspring of Dustless and Kagaya's bloodline would be. This meant that other than the abilities obtained from the system, all of Dustless's abilities could be passed down through genes, including the abilities possessed by Kagaya. It still feels a little strange. After thinking about it, Dustless smiled bitterly. After all, he had done that kind of thing with Yu Luo many times in the past. The latter's stomach did not make the slightest sound, and until now, he had only had intimate contact with Kagaya once, but it was a direct hit. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of Kagaya's peerless figure. On the surface, Dustless expressed that he didn't care about Kagaya, but in fact, he cared about her quite a lot. Now that she was pregnant with Dustless's flesh and blood, it was even more difficult to give up. The sudden birth of life had already linked Kagaya and Dustless together forever. Compared to the conflicted Dustless, the system's consciousness or was more open-minded and teased with a smile, "This is called fate." Hearing this, Dustless rolled his eyes and was too lazy to argue with her. The onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved. He was afraid that Kagaya's current mood was as complicated as Dustless's. The higher the level of the life form, the more difficult it was to reproduce. Not only Kagaya, but also Dustless. To a certain extent, it was a miracle that Kagaya's body could be pregnant. "Stop talking nonsense, let's draw the lottery." Dustless threw the complicated thoughts out of his mind and said. "Counter soldiers with arms and water with an earth weir." Now, they could only take one step at a time. Overall, Dustless was still relatively satisfied with this result for the time being. Ling, tapped the void lightly, and a huge circular turntable fell out of thin air. It was marked with various major abilities. The overwhelming number of abilities made Wuchen drool with envy. For the current Dustless, some of the abilities were still extremely heaven-defying. The wheel turned slowly, and under Dustless's expectant gaze, from slow to fast, during which some of the abilities of the benchmark made Dustless confused. After a few breaths of time, the spinning wheel slowly came to a stop. "What the hell is this?" The thing that the benchmark pointed to made Dustless's eyes widen. The appearance was an unprecedented super meteorite. The magnificent meteorite was unimaginably big, enough to cover the entire void. Dustless knew the following words. "Uchiha Madara's, Tengai season? What's the use of this thing?" With a stiff expression, Dustless's expectation disappeared, and asked with dissatisfaction. "This kind of trick is dispensable for Kuroto. He can use the terrifying gravitational force of the Tensigen to create a meteorite group that is far larger than the Tensigen." Flashy but impractical techniques were of no help to Wu Chen's strength. They were like chicken bones that were tasteless and a pity to throw away. They were of no use at all. What is a lottery? It's entirely based on your own luck. You can only blame that time doesn't wait for you. Glancing at Dustless, Ling said. There are good and bad things. The lottery has nothing to do with strength. It is entirely based on one's own luck. Helplessly curling his lips, Wu Chen intended to refute, but he had nothing to say. He could only sigh at his bad luck. The principle of the Tensigen technique is extremely simple. He has Rinnegan and Tensigen, so he doesn't lack this ability. Let's go and see her. Looking at the void in the distance, Dustless secretly decided. Accompanied by a sharp whistling sound that cut through the endless firmament, Wu Chen's body also disappeared without a trace. In the boundless sky, only a straight golden ray of light was left. In the ancient room, Kagaya looked at the outside world through the open window. Her face was complicated. Her jade hand sometimes gently stroked her slightly bloated belly, and a gentle and charming smile appeared on her cold and delicate face. Fate is playing tricks on me. A complicated sigh burst out from her red lips, and Kagaya's face was full of confusion. To be honest, Kagaya has a bone-deep hatred for Dustless. She can't wait to tear him into pieces. Not to mention taking her chastity, he also ruined her dream of unifying the world, so it's natural for her to hate Dustless. Although Dustless finally acquiesced to her taking back all the chakra, Kagaya still hates him. However, now that she is suddenly pregnant with her and Dustless's child, the contradiction buried deep in her heart suddenly broke out, and she can no longer maintain the indifference of the past. She once thought about simply ending the life in her belly, but she couldn't do it. After all, it is Kagaya's flesh and blood. What's more, Kagaya is a very maternal person. Even if Dustless is wrong, it has nothing to do with the child in her belly. Kagaya's eyes are particularly blank and helpless, as if she is living in a large whirlpool, unable to extricate herself. The world around her has chosen to treat her coldly, and she has no one to rely on. In a trance, a warm little hand grabbed her, causing her to be stunned and subconsciously open her eyes. The young figure that came into view had messy hair and an elegant smile on his lips. His deep eyes were as bright as stars at any time. However, in Kagaya's eyes, the figure in front of her is extremely annoying. Instead of spending time with your little wife, you've come to this secluded corner of this concubine's home. What are you trying to do by coming here? Her face turned cold as she felt the hand grabbing onto hers. Anger flashed across her face. The person who came into view is Dustless. What am I trying to do? I am the father of the child. Hearing this, Dustless rolled his eyes, as if this is how it should be. He touched Kagaya's little hand and sighed inwardly. It's really smooth. Take your hand away, don't force me. Glaring at Dustless, Kagaya warned fiercely, and at the same time, a monstrous evil aura erupted from her body, indicating that she is not joking. Dustless, however, just smiled. You are my second wife, and the child in your belly is my seed. As the father of the child, is it wrong to listen to the movements of my future child? After saying that, Dustless's ear was close to Kagaya's belly. Readers, do you like a son or a daughter? At least give me an opinion. Chapter 5:10. Kagaya's pretty face was livid. Seeing Dustless being so unscrupulous and frivolous, she condensed a chakra fluctuation that was enough to shatter a mountain with her other hand. Kagaya was the ancestor of chakra. In the era where she lived, there was no concept of techniques. Any technique could be easily grasped. Are you sure you want to touch me? I'll just hug you like this. Dustless had a shameless look. His hands wrapped around Kagaya's waist and pulled her into his embrace. He deeply inhaled Kagaya's unique body fragrance and was addicted to it. Smack. The curvy body aroused Dustless's evil fire. Now that Kagaya was pregnant, Dustless couldn't force her to the ground and force himself on her. He could only stand and take advantage of her verbally. Dustless's lips were left on Kagaya's face with some water stains. Lecher. Kagaya clenched her teeth. She had never felt that Dustless was so hateful. Although he was shameless enough in the past, it was much better than his current shameless appearance. The majestic chakra that was condensed in her hands suddenly disappeared. Her eyes looked at the void in front of her indifferently. Her hostility was also restrained, as if she had acquiesced to Dustless's frivolity. How can Sun Wukong fight against Buddha? He is still my meal, Kagaya. Dustless gently blew a breath of hot air into Kagaya's ear. He was extremely pleased with himself. In such a short distance, Dustless would definitely be affected by such an unscrupulous attack. So would Kagaya. The young and fragile life in her belly would be annihilated by the impact of the energy wave. Although Dustless's method was extremely despicable, it could be seen that Kagaya had feelings for the child in her belly. At the very least, she wouldn't hurt her. Her tight heart relaxed. Dustless was actually testing her. In fact, there is no need to fight and kill all day. You and I have already done it as husband and wife. Now we even have a child. There is no need to hunt me down. I am the father of the child. Dustless released Kagaya's hands and said sternly. Hearing this, Kagaya just sneered. This child has nothing to do with you. You are just an unrelated outsider, and your future surname is Otsutsuki, not Uchiha. That's all. From the beginning to the end, she had never admitted that this child was related to Dustless. The so-called father was just his wishful thinking. That's not up to you. Hearing that, Wuchen just smiled. Blood was thicker than water, and it was impossible for Kagaya to change it. The blood that flowed in her bones was a fact that could not be violated. This kind of thing could not be erased forever. It seems that it will take a while. Glancing at Kagaya's belly, Dustless secretly calculated in his heart. The belly is only slightly bulging. According to the normal human pregnancy cycle, it will take at least a few months for the child to be born. Dustless's eyes flashed with a strange light. It's really difficult to tame this wild horse. In the past, he could completely ignore the existence of Kagaya and let her do whatever she wants, but now he can't use the original method. It's not up to me. Hearing this, Kagaya sneered again and again, and her white eyes overflowed with cold light. Her whole body overflowed with powerful cold air, and the whole room turned into an iceberg in an instant. Everything in the room was destroyed, and only Kagaya and Dustless stood still. His skinny figure stood still like a rock that couldn't be moved. He just stood there quietly like that. His eyes were as calm as an ancient well and were abnormally calm. They were so deep that they sparkled like black agates. From beginning to end, her expression was so relaxed and indifferent. Hateful. Seeing this, Kagai's beautiful face surged with an even stronger baleful aura, and she pounced on Dustless. The ferocious baleful aura even caused the space around Dustless to distort. This is the goddess of Uno, Kagai. Her strength is tyrannical, and there are no techniques in her eyes. The so-called techniques are created at will. In the distorted space, a strong suction force shot out, trying to twist Dustless into pieces. Because the force was too strong, the dust particles on the ground strangely floated up and uncontrollably drilled into the distorted dark space. Dustless's handsome face didn't change like a sculpture. His hands were in front of him, and he let Kagai cast her technique. His tall and straight posture didn't move, nor did he run away, nor did he make any defense. Even so, Dustless's feet were connected to everything in the world. No one could devour him, and no one could shake him. Seeing this scene, Kagai's expression was in a trance. She didn't know when the gap between her and Dustless had become so big. Kagai, with your level, you will never be able to shake me. Staring at the slightly depressed Kagai, Dustless said the truth. In the Naruto world, Dustless and Kagai were at the same stage. Coming to this world, Dustless's strength was slowly improving, but Kagai, who had been imprisoned in the system world, didn't improve her strength. Instead, her strength regressed for some reason. According to Dustless's speculation, it should be related to the baby in her belly. It seemed that the baby in her belly was hungry for her chakra. What was touching was that Kagai didn't cut off the connection with chakra because of this. I remember I told you before, don't try to resist fate. Since you swallowed the fruit of the divine tree, all the curses started. If you didn't swallow the fruit of the divine tree back then, there wouldn't be such karma today. Now, you have become my possession. This is not an accident, but fate. Ka ka ka, the sonorous and powerful sound resounded through the room, and the powerful airwaves spread. The wooden hut that had been frozen by Kagai's killing intent collapsed in an instant, and warm sunlight shone in. Dustless's eyes were locked on the slightly sluggish Kagai, and he declared his sovereignty to her overbearingly. Remember this clearly, I don't want to repeat this sentence a third time. There is only one master in this world, and his name is Uchiha Dustless. Chapter 5:11. Where there is a cause, there is an effect. This is a principle that does not change. Kagai swallowed the fruit of the divine tree and obtained the power to destroy the world. Dustless was ambitious and also wanted the power to make thousands of creatures fear. Therefore, it was destined that the two of them would have a cycle of cause and effect. Kagai was destined to become Dustless's possession. No one could be at ease in the face of a heavenly treasure like the divine tree. Dustless's words immediately angered Kagai. The dignified goddess of Mao, a god above the pyramid, was treated as an object by Dustless. How could Kagai not be angry? Especially when Dustless looked like he was going to eat her, it made her feel particularly uncomfortable. Eating 5 kilograms was not as uncomfortable as this. Facts speak louder than words. I am just stating the facts, there is no need to be so angry. Dustless raised his eyelids and looked at Kagai. Kagai's eyes were filled with fire. The more indifferent Dustless was, the angrier she was. Although Dustless's words were a bit harsh and he did not care about Kagai's face, this was an undeniable fact. The current Kagai no longer had the strength to threaten him. Especially when chakra was swallowed by the fetus in her belly, her strength was not as strong as before. Facts. What a big tone. Glaring at Dustless, Kagai said with murderous intent. Being lectured by a brat who was thousands of years younger than her, and such unpleasant words, even with Kagai's magnanimity, she could not tolerate it. Moreover, she was not so magnanimous that she could accept Dustless's ridicule. Most women were petty, especially Dustless, who was the person she hated the most. Chakra burst out like a flash flood, the horrifying density was close to liquid. As the ancestor of chakra, the amount of chakra in Kagai's body was beyond imagination. Even though most of the chakra in his body had already been swallowed up by the life in his body, the chakra that was gushing out was still as vast and boundless as the ocean. Above the horizon, a boundless energy tide formed. Purple light filled the entire void, and even the blue sky was covered by the purple light. The light shining on the ground also changed from blue to purple. Everyone's chakra color is different. For example, Uchiha Madara's chakra is dark blue, Dustless's chakra is golden, and Kagaya's is golden. Sure enough, every time we meet, a fierce battle is inevitable. Dustless's face was full of helplessness. He thought that he would be able to survive this time, but he didn't expect it to be the same as before. Her cold eyes circled around Dustless. Kagai's voice was no longer as cold as before, and there was some gentleness in it, making Dustless see the warm dawn of dawn. Looking at Dustless for a moment, Kagai's eyes flashed with a strange color. She had to admit that if there was only one choice for a spouse, Dustless in front of her was the most suitable. It was barely perfect. The only thing that made her unbearable was that Dustless's arrogant and unquestionable character and tone often gave Kagai such an illusion. In front of Dustless, even if it was a god, he had to lower his head and obey his orders obediently. "Let me surrender to you." White eyes filled with determination, Kagai made up her mind to end things with Dustless. Hearing this, Dustless's body froze, and then his eyes widened, looking at Kagai incredulously. Instinctively, he thought that this speech was a conspiracy. There is no such thing as a free lunch in the sky. When did the fierce goddess of Uno take the initiative to come to the door? Don't misunderstand, I also have a condition. Seeing that Dustless's thoughts went astray, Kagai immediately pulled Dustless's thoughts back. Want her to come to the door directly? Don't be wishful thinking. Dustless frowned slightly, and his gaze became sharp, penetrating the heavy void and landing on Kagai's body. It was incomparably cold, as if he wanted to see through her true thoughts. However, Kagai was covered in a mysterious veil and was wrapped in thick chakra, blocking Dustless's prying. There's no harm in saying it. After thinking for a while, Dustless no longer hesitated and signaled Kagai to directly state her conditions. This heroic tone, as well as that thick confidence, as well as the confidence to be able to remain calm in the face of everything, made Kagai's brows knit together. Staring at Dustless, who had a faint smile on the corner of his mouth, she heavily snorted. "As long as you can withstand 80% of my strength in my current state and withstand 3 of my moves without moving, I will follow you wherever you go." Meeting Dustless's gaze, Kagai clenched her teeth. After saying that, Kagai's eyes stared fixedly at Dustless. As long as he retreated in the slightest and avoided her gaze, it meant that Dustless didn't have the courage, and his previous bold words were all empty words. However, she was destined to be disappointed. Dustless's expression didn't change from beginning to end. Not only did he not show any signs of retreating, the corner of his mouth raised into the long-awaited smile. "What's so funny?" Glaring angrily at Dustless, Kagai asked unkindly. She was serious, but Dustless's smile was perfunctory. "Of course it's funny, you took the initiative to come to the door for me to enjoy, how can I not be happy?" Looking at Kagai, Dustless's mouth raised a smile of success. It seems that the previous excessive words had a good effect. Kagai's angry look was within his expectations. If you want to make her collapse, you must first make her crazy. Since Kagai has made a move, Dustless certainly can't back down. The smile on his face quickly disappeared, and his thumb pointed to the ground under his feet, and a powerful roar resounded through the sky. "Don't save your strength, just bring out your full strength. As long as you can make my feet move a little bit, Dustless Uchiha will lose, and from then on, you can fly as high as you want." The unruly voice was like rolling thunder, reaching people's ears, making them dizzy. Hearing this, Kagai couldn't help but look at Dustless in astonishment. That unprecedented confidence, even she was affected. Ah! Chapter 5:12. Kagai stared at Dustless. Her white eyes seemed to want to pierce through Dustless. She was really puzzled. Where did this confidence come from? After a short moment of daze, it was replaced by a murderous look. There's a path to heaven but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell but you want to throw yourself into it. You deserve to be killed. Seeing Dustless looking down on her, Kaggai sneered and looked at him coldly. Maybe she really wasn't Dustless's opponent, but forcing Dustless to move his feet was still very easy for her. Killed? That's still too far away from me. If you have the ability to kill me, you can try. Shaking his head slightly, Dustless signaled Kaggai to bring it on. Looking at Kaggai calmly, Dustless's feet went deep into the ground and were connected to the whole earth. His hands were relaxed in front of him and he was abnormally calm. His eyes were fixed on Kaggai. Now was the best time to tame this arrogant wild horse. Dustless naturally wouldn't let go of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Could it be that this guy can? Dustless's confidence immediately aroused a woman's suspicious nature. Kaggai's heart couldn't help but be filled with fanciful thoughts. Suddenly, she remembered Dustless's elemental transformation that could ignore all physical attacks. Her delicate face froze. Don't worry, I naturally won't use elemental transformation. It's all based on my true ability. Seeing Kaggai's worries, Dustless chuckled and gave her a look that said there was no need to worry. Seeing this, Kaggai was silent. She wanted to speak but couldn't say anything. Because elemental transformation was one of Dustless's many abilities, it was also considered a true ability that could easily dodge all attacks. Saying that he would give up using this ability that could allow him to dodge all attacks, the shock it brought to Kaggai was indescribable. This is your own choice, I didn't force you. Looking deeply at Dustless, Kaggai said in a deep voice. Her impression of Dustless finally changed. However, Dustless's next sentence made the remaining good impression in Huey's heart vanish. You didn't force me. It must be you who forced me to do this. If you didn't push your luck, how could I be standing here as a live target for you? Dustless said seriously as he stared at Huey's face. There was a deep sense of helplessness and a headache on his face. It was obvious that he wanted to push all the blame onto Kaggai. Kill Grey Bones together. The cold light gathered in his white eyes, and then the ferocious blue veins bulged on both sides of his eyes. Wu Chen's acupoints were exposed under his eyelids. He aimed at the most vulnerable position, and the overflowing bone spur in his hand shot out directly. The cold white light was unstoppable. Anything that came into contact with it was instantly annihilated. Due to its overwhelming power, ripples appeared in the void as it passed by. This woman is so ruthless. Dustless clicked his tongue when he saw Kaggai's first move was so ruthless. This technique, kill Grey Bones together. Dustless was as clear as a mirror. Anyone who came into contact with it would die, and not even their bones would be left behind. Such a blatant killing intent, there was no love between husband and wife. However, since Kaggai had already made her move, Dustless would not back down. If he did not tame this arrogant woman, he would never be able to control her in the future. A very strong technique, it looks very sharp. It must be good to use it to cut fruits. Dustless said calmly as he looked at Kaggai with a chuckle. Kaggai, who had lived for thousands of years, was unparalleled in her wisdom. She immediately chose to counterattack and said coldly, I hope you won't be cut open by the fruit knife in your mouth. With a groan, Kaggai no longer paid attention to Dustless. The veins at the corner of her eyes bulged as she locked onto Dustless's footsteps. As long as he moved a little, Dustless would lose. Cut open my stomach? It's still a long way from that. The void behind Dustless suddenly emitted a dazzling golden brilliance. It was so dazzling that Kaggai subconsciously stretched out her snow-white wrist to block in front of her eyes. Through the weak gap between her fingers, she looked at the changes in front. This is, after a while, Kaggai, who noticed that the light had weakened, withdrew her arm and looked at the scene in front of her in disbelief. For a moment, her mind stopped thinking. In the void behind Wu Qin, there were countless divine weapons floating in the sky. The number was so dense that it was dazzling and overwhelming. Every weapon was polished and tempered thousands of times. It was a work of the gods and could be called a peerless divine weapon. But Kaggai's gaze was focused on the odachi in Dustless's hand. Pa pa pa, in the clear sky, the crackling sound of lightning suddenly sounded. The suppressed roar made people feel despair and fear involuntarily. Looking up, the blood-colored lightning was clearly visible, and it gradually became larger and extended. This blade is called the first-generation ghost blade. It is an ominous blade and the strongest demon blade in the world. Dustless touched the vicissitudes texture of the scabbard and said with emotion. Hawkeye's black blade, Knight, did not have the existence of demon aura. Although it was also one of the 12 supreme Wazai techniques, the powerful demon aura of the first-generation ghost blade was much more difficult to control than that of Knight. In normal times, Dustless threw the first-generation ghost blade into the Gate of Babylon. Clang! Pa pa pa, the crisp sound of steel rang out as the first-generation ghost blade was slowly unsheathed. The more the sharp blade was unsheathed, the thicker and more terrifying the blood-colored lightning in the sky became, and the larger the area of the lightning became. When the entire blade was exposed to the air, the sky was already covered with blood-colored lightning, like a sea of lightning. On the other hand, Wu Chen's entire temperament had changed drastically. His deep eyes had turned blood red, and his entire body was covered in a purplish-black mist. That powerful and almost materialized demonic aura made one's scalp go numb. "It's over, Kagai," Dustless's voice fell, the first-generation ghost blade in his hand was raised, and a huge blood-red light whizzed out from the tip of the blade. The void along the way was directly torn and crushed by the powerful sword pressure. In the blink of an eye, the bone spur that rushed over was swallowed, and the two disappeared between heaven and earth at the same time. The only thing that proved their existence was the sky that was torn by the sword pressure. Chapter 5:13. The long and narrow space that was torn apart showed jagged marks as if it was bitten by a shark. On the other side, the dark space went straight to the depths of the universe, and the whole shot out a terrifying devouring force. Fortunately, this was a small space in the system. The space was weak and abnormally fragile compared to the outside world. The outside world absolutely could not tear the void so easily. The remaining energy fluctuations in the air had not yet dissipated. While the void cracks were being repaired, they were immediately pulled apart by this tyrannical force. This cycle repeated again and again, and the scene was even more terrifying. How is it? The demonic blood light seeped out from behind Dustless, and the scarlet eyes floated out a faint blood mist. The corner of his mouth was slightly raised, and Dustless, who was holding the first-generation ghost blade, gave a particularly gloomy feeling. His whole body seemed to be soaked in a blood pool, and the smell of blood assailed the nostrils. Deep in the clouds, the blood lightning gathered on the ground, and the entire system world showed a decay and collapse. It seems that this world is also a wonderful place, where the strong gather. Cautiously looking at the blood lightning in the void, Huiji said with a little yearning. The unknown world, the top strong, this was the biggest temptation for Huiji. The first move is over, there are still two more. The smell of blood came head-on. Looking up, it was Dustless who was holding the first-generation ghost blade. The bloody light draped over his back, and there was no human emotion in his cold eyes. The ground under Wu Chen's feet had been eroded to the point that it was unbearable to look at. It had turned black. The surface of the ground had died forever, and there was no possibility of revival. Don't be complacent. Eyes locked on Dustless, Huiji warned fiercely. The cold air that floated out of the thin lips could freeze the air, and the condensed ice fell to the ground, adding a little gloominess. Huiji's face was hazy with a transparent cold mist, and her pale face was even more terrifying. From the beginning to the end, under the insight of the abnormal ability of Byakugan, she clearly saw that Dustless's feet did not move at all. "It seems to me that you're regretting it out of humiliation," Dustless asked with a smile when he saw Huiji's terrifying expression. He then raised two fingers and shook them at Huiji. "There are still two moves left. If you beg me, I can go easy on you. After all, a day as husband and wife means endless devotion for the rest of your life. I can reluctantly give you some face." Seeing Dustless's actions, Hui's face turned ashen. She opened her mouth to retort, but she was speechless. The cruel reality made her feel extremely powerless. Dustless glanced at Kaguya and said in a hoarse voice, "That's the difference between you and me. The world is huge, but you're still immersed in the bubble of the goddess of Uno. Everything in the past has already gone with the wind." The universe was so vast that even Dustless himself was nothing more than an insignificant grain of sand, let alone Huey. "You have a sharp tongue. I didn't expect you to be so good at talking as well. You're really impressive." Glaring at Dustless, Huey mocked. Ka. Her thin and weak body shook, and the spatial ability of Yomi no Miyazaka was activated. Kaguya's lips curled into a smug smile, and then she withdrew into it. Seeing this, Dustless frowned slightly. His nerves tightened, and his vast perception spread out in all directions. Within a radius of several kilometers, he did not miss even the slightest movement. This technique was strange and unpredictable. It was mysterious beyond imagination. Wuchen couldn't perceive where it would appear. He could only use his spirit to defend passively. "No matter where you hide, your final target will always be me." After a long while, Dustless, who had not found any trace of Huey, said in a hoarse voice that resounded through the void, accompanied by a gust of wind that spread to every corner of the sky. Ka. The space in front of him suddenly exploded, and Huey, who was wielding a bone knife, flashed out of thin air. She appeared in front of Dustless like a ghost, and a sharp cold light came down. The power that was enough to disintegrate mountains and rivers was about to dismember Dustless. Launching an unexpected attack was indeed difficult to deal with. He could take advantage of the opportunity to catch the enemy off guard. Even so, Wu Chen, who entered his sight, was surprisingly calm. His eyes were as still as stagnant water without any ripples. A dazzling golden luster burst out from his body, and a strange three-headed and six-armed Buddha statue suddenly appeared, covering and protecting Dustless's body. Clang! In just a short time, the powerful three-headed and six-armed Buddha statue easily grabbed Huey's bone blade. The power was so great that even if Huey gathered all the strength in her body, she couldn't pull out the bone blade. Moreover, this strange three-headed and six-armed Buddha statue showed no signs of decay or collapse. "This is..." Huey's eyes widened, and she was speechless. Facing Dustless, or rather, his countless trump cards, Huey G was already immune to them. However, facing this strange and ugly golden Buddha statue with fangs and a monstrous face, she couldn't help but fall into a daze. There's no need to be surprised. This is just an improved miniature Kinsusunu based on the complete Kinsusunu. The appearance of the body is much smaller, but the power it exerts is more powerful than the original complete body. "Concentration is the essence," Dustless said in an extremely casual tone. After saying that, his gaze fell on Huey's delicate body. Looking at her who didn't move, Dustless chuckled and said, "What's your last move? Or are you already at your wit's end and plan to wash yourself clean and send yourself to me?" Unlike before, Huey showed a gentle smile on the face of Dustless's teasing this time, which made people feel like they were bathed in the spring breeze. Dustless was slightly stunned when he saw this. He frowned and looked at the abnormal Huey, trying to find a flaw in her body. Just as he was about to speak, her pleasant voice sounded first. "The third move has been launched." As Huey's light voice fell, a dazzling white light suddenly shot down from the sky. Dustless, who didn't feel it, subconsciously looked at the dazzling light in the sky. After a while, his pupils suddenly turned pale, and he became a walking corpse. Chapter 5:14. It turned out that the black and white eye socket had also undergone earth-shaking changes. It turned into a lavender eye, and circles of black ripples spread out. It was simple and mysterious. It was the legendary Supreme Eye, Rinnegan. The dazzling white light was extremely terrifying, and its penetrating ability was extremely powerful. Anyone who was illuminated by this white light all showed the same eyes as Dustless and became a walking corpse. It covered the world of the entire system, and everything in the world had nowhere to hide. Looking up, the moon tens of thousands of miles away turned into a bloody Rinnegan Sharingan, which coincided with the shape of the Rinnegan Sharingan between Kaguya's eyebrows. It was extremely strange. Her proud gaze fell on Dustless. Seeing that he was already a walking corpse, Huiji's smile was like a beautiful woman, and her limpid eyes surged with joy. She had been suppressed by Dustless for a long time, and her resentment had been accumulated for a long time. Now that Dustless was controlled by infinite Tsukuyomi, her whole body seemed to be floating in the depths of the clouds, extremely light. With a gentle and elegant step, she crossed the layers of space and instantly came in front of Dustless. Even if Kaguya was as cold as snow, the smile on her face could not be concealed. At the moment when infinite Tsukuyomi illuminated the world, all creatures were in my bag, and you are no exception. There is no invincible trick in the world. You were too confident, but you were too careless. This is the root cause of your failure. Quietly looking at the handsome face close to her, Kaguya's frown and smile were full of charm. She didn't care if Dustless could hear her and said with emotion. Thinking of how he had been suppressed by Wu Chen and how miserable he had been, and now looking at Wu Chen who had lost his soul, he felt particularly relieved. It ends here. Her gaze swept past Dustless, who was caught in the infinite dream. The moment Kaguya turned around and was about to leave, a thin but extremely stable arm hugged her waist and took her into his arms. Kaguya was stunned and immediately looked back. As you said before, there is no invincible technique in the world. I was too careless, Kaguya. An abnormally calm voice sounded from his throat. The person who spoke was none other than Dustless, who had fallen into infinite Tsukuyomi. Dustless suddenly broke free from infinite Tsukuyomi. Kaguya didn't seem to have come back to her senses for the time being. She just looked at him in shock. A pair of relatively warm hands took advantage of the gaps and skillfully invaded the Daoist robe. Hui, who was in a daze, noticed the small hands that wandered around her chest. She then stared fiercely at Dustless. Is the goddess of Uno trying to go back on her word? His words left Kaguya speechless. She could only stare at Dustless. Living in the ancient era, her thoughts were restricted by the ancients. The principles of poetry and etiquette were deeply ingrained in her bones. I will naturally abide by the previous agreement. But, how did you escape the nightmare created by infinite Tsukuyomi? Ignoring the small hands in her arms, Kaguya looked at Dustless with a look of curiosity. Seeing this scene, in line with the principle of not taking advantage of a bastard, Dustless became even more unscrupulous. It's very simple, because my Rinnegan Sharingan is above infinite Tsukuyomi. Its light can't penetrate me. Dustless explained casually. Dustless has many ways to fight against infinite Tsukuyomi. He seized Sasuke's Rinnegan, so naturally, he wasn't afraid of infinite Tsukuyomi. In addition, Dustless's Rinnegan Sharingan is comparable to Kaguya's. Since you can use infinite Tsukuyomi, why are you trapped in it? Are you insulting me? Staring at Dustless, Kaguya asked coldly. At the same time, she hit the small hands in her lapel. Are you sure you want me to say it? Reluctantly retracting his arm and shrugging, Dustless explained softly, it's very simple. When the enemy is complacent and thinks that victory is assured, it's more interesting to jump out and tease her. After saying that, Dustless looked at Kaguya with interest. He thought that she would go berserk on the spot, but unexpectedly, she was extremely calm. It's undeniable that you won. With a flash of sadness in her eyes, Hui's frosty voice softened. It was no longer as unapproachable as before, and there was a rare hint of approval. It seems that she acquiesced to the relationship with Dustless. While talking, Dustless also came over, and then gently touched Kaguya's belly, carefully feeling the changes in her fragile life. Lowering her head, her white eyes observed Dustless. A hint of surprise flashed in Kaguya's eyes, and she sighed quietly. She didn't stop Dustless's action. Her peerless face became gentler, and she was no longer as cold as the snow lotus. Kaguya could feel that Dustless was sincere, at least for the child in her belly, and there was no ugly hypocrisy. In order to obtain power that surpassed others, it was common to kill one's own flesh and blood. No matter how times have changed, there were countless of them. Kaguya thought too much. Dustless was not such a person at all, or it could be said that he didn't care about such methods at all. At that moment, the resistance in her heart towards him decreased a lot. Humans are not plants, how can they be emotionless? As a parent, they only care about their offspring. Kaguya could empathize. A monster that can devour chakra. Kaguya's face was strange, and then she shook her head in puzzlement. Dustless was also confused. The fetus in Kaguya's belly was more like a monster made of chakra. It was just pure energy that was endowed with life, and its flesh and blood was completely made of chakra. And Dustless could sense his own chakra. How can a body of flesh and blood be a monster? You're so ignorant. Although you're strong, your knowledge is shallow. You're just a layman. Kaguya scolded in dissatisfaction, secretly scolding Dustless. You're blaming me. Dustless smiled embarrassedly, and his head was full of black lines. He was extremely speechless. Continuously devouring chakra was a fantasy, especially when it happened to a fetus that was still in the process of being born. It was even more unreasonable. Chapter 5:15. Dustless responded with a wry smile and was extremely speechless. He didn't refute Kaguya's words and smiled casually. He knew Kaguya's character. She was cold and indifferent, but she was warm inside. Even if she didn't like Dustless now, she was sincere about the fetus in her belly. Unconsciously, Dustless also had a touch of jealousy for the fetus in Kaguya's belly. Gently caressing her slightly bloated belly, a gentle smile appeared on Huey's cold face. It was a smile that was simple yet sincere. It was like the warm sun in the spring of March, mesmerizing people. Of course, the object of the smile was not Dustless. After a sweet chuckle for a while, her eyes fell on Dustless, and the smile suddenly disappeared. Although she was not as cold as before, her attitude towards Dustless was still quite cold. By the way, every time you come in without being asked, what do you want? Kaguya asked with a little curiosity as her eyes turned around Dustless. Hearing this, Dustless's mouth twitched without a trace. Entering the system world, it's not a lottery, of course, it's a slap slap slap. Let's be clear, this is my territory, and it's my freedom to come and go. Dustless rolled his eyes and snorted. Kaguya just glanced at Dustless faintly, her expression was a little unnatural, and she was too lazy to expose Dustless's ridiculous trick. In Kaguya's perception, every time he enters the system world, it's not a good thing. It will probably take a few more months. Looking at his slightly bloated and slightly protruding lower abdomen, Wu Qin calculated. It will take about 5 or 6 months before the day of birth. This is only the most conservative estimate. It's not impossible to delay for a while. After all, Kaguya is not a normal human being. Her strength is extraordinary. If she erupts with all her strength, the whole world is not enough for her to toss. Looking at Kaguya deeply, Dustless was about to leave, but her voice came in advance. This child's surname will be Otsutsuki, and he will have nothing to do with the Uchiha. Kaguya said firmly. Her words were full of disdain for the Uchiha, and there was a hint of warning. Dustless frowned slightly, but he did not refute. He only said indifferently, "What do you mean by this? Are you threatening me?" Dustless's pitch-black eyes flashed with a touch of hostility. All those who had threatened him had already stepped onto the path to heaven. In this life, Dustless hated those who overestimated themselves and tried to threaten him. The Uchiha clan is just a branch of the Otsutsuki clan. It is more appropriate for my children to be named Otsutsuki, that's all. Looking at Dustless lightly, Kaguya said softly. When she said the words, "this concubine's child," her expression was especially kind. Dustless frowned tightly when he heard this. Although what Kaguya said was very reasonable, he still felt that it was unreasonable. When he was about to open his mouth to refute, he remembered her current subtle identity and shut his mouth. A good man does not fight with a woman, especially now that she is still waiting to give birth. The truth is always said by the person with the bigger fist. It is useless to say more now, it is just a waste of breath. I didn't expect you to be so eloquent, Kaguya. Dustless glanced at Kaguya blankly and said coldly. In fact, whether the surname is Uchiha or Otsutsuki, Dustless really doesn't care. The only thing that makes it difficult for him to accept is the command and threat in Kagaya's tone, which aroused the flame in his heart. After you give birth to the child, then. Humph. Dustless looked around at Kagaya's curvy body and smiled evilly. There are many ways to take revenge on others. It is not necessary to make her surrender by force. Choosing the way that Kagaya hates the most to take revenge on her will make her feel good. Mercilessly trampling on the dignity that she is proud of, until she screams and begs for mercy, this is what Dustless wants. Eloquent? I learned this from you. Glancing at Dustless, Kagaya smiled proudly. In the past countless confrontations, Kagaya has failed, and she can't even gain the slightest advantage in words. Boring and vulgar, people like you always like to think that you are smart, and you have lived for thousands of years. Without waiting for Kagaya to answer, Dustless's body began to slowly fade, and his aura gradually disappeared. His whole body glowed with a bright golden luster, and then disappeared from the system world forever. The damage caused by the previous fight was also slowly repaired, and the infinite Tsukuyomi covering the world also disappeared as if nothing had happened, and everything returned to normal. Somewhere on an island in the new world. Damn Kaido, don't think it's over. The fat man stared at the distant sea, murderous, and his eyes turned scarlet. His eyes were full of messy blood vessels like spider webs. Looking closely, he is the focus of this time, Gecko Moria. On the surface of the sea in the distance, there were a large number of ship fragments, as well as many corpses and sea kings. Fresh blood dyed the entire surface of the sea crimson. Large sea kings heard the news and came over, their stomachs rumbling with hunger as they tore apart the floating corpses. Most of these people are Gecko Moria's crew. The strength of 100 Beast Kaido is beyond imagination, whether it is the fleet or himself. He almost crushed Gecko Moria's pirates and Moria's self-esteem with a crushing posture. Defeat is like a landslide. Without accidents, the possibility of him rising in the future is almost zero. Bastard, this blood debt must be repaid 10 times. His pupils suddenly enlarged several times. Gecko Moria gritted his teeth and roared to the sky. The murderous aura solidified the surrounding air, and the sharp screams of ghosts could be faintly heard. The current Gecko Moria is not as cold and ruthless as he will be in the future. He still cares about his companions today. They are companions who have been together for more than 10 years or even longer. Now that 70% of them have been annihilated by Kaido, how can he not be angry? A pirate's temper is irritable. Revenge is their nature, and cruelty is their true portrayal. Chapter 5:16. In this pirate world, 90% of the area is filled with the sea. Being a pirate can be said to be a uniquely bright future profession. In the spacious and never-changing villa, there are only 2 people, Dustless and White Zetsu. That little rascal Law is really desperate. Corazone's death was a big blow to him. He trained himself without any regard for his own life. His fearless appearance is really shameful. White Zetsu, whose whole body was monotonous white, reported truthfully. Every once in a while, White Zetsu would report the key targets that Dustless paid attention to, as well as the areas of activity, to him in full detail. People like Law are even more important to Dustless. After all, the operation involves immortality surgery. Even if Dustless can achieve longevity, the women he gets along with day and night can't do it. What are the motives of Hawkeye and Doflamingo? With his eyes closed, Dustless asked casually. For these 2 people, Dustless is not worried. Hawkeye is the kind of person with a noble temperament. The probability of betrayal is 0. Doflamingo is currently holding Dustless's thigh. He is afraid that he can't stick together forever. How can he defect? If he loses the umbrella that Dustless opened for him, even if Doflamingo is a celestial dragon, the role he can play in front of Gorosei, 5 elder stars, is minimal. Doflamingo is happy to loot the celestial dragons, heavenly gold, and Hawkeye is very idle, helping Caesar build Pluto. White Zetsu replied truthfully, with the protection of Dustless and the halo of his celestial dragon, Doflamingo is a very popular kid. Hawkeye is responsible for protecting Caesar's safety, and other than that, he sleeps with his head covered. By the way, where did Crocodile go? Dustless suddenly asked, and the ridicule in his tone was undisguised. Without thinking about it, he knew that the angry sand crocodile, was hit by Dustless and must be hiding in a corner of the new world, working hard to practice internal strength. Faced with Dustless's godlike strength, he had no other choice but to undergo devilish self-training. Lord Dustless, you guessed wrong this time. Looking at Dustless, White Zeus shook his head. Hearing this, Dustless's indifferent expression finally loosened a little. He asked curiously, shouldn't that kid be bitterly training his strength right now? Don't tell me he's hunting for fun. Dustless did not take advantage of the situation to kill Crocodile back then because he had an unknown purpose. The reason why he used his overwhelming strength to crush Crocodile was to leave an indelible mark in his heart. He hoped that this humiliation would motivate Crocodile to move forward with all his might. Now, it seemed that things would only move in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme. He really seems to have given up on himself now. He is very idle all day, traveling around the world. Shrugging, White Zetsu was also quite surprised by Crocodile's current situation. Perhaps it was because Dustless had given Crocodile too much of a blow. Now, the kid was able to face the future calmly. Dustless frowned tightly and asked calmly, is the kid's goal to play in the Grand Lines Albeston? Thinking of what Crocodile did in the future, Dustless asked. In order to retaliate against himself, he tried to steal and even resurrect Pluton. It is not impossible for him to retaliate. Crocodile was an ambitious man. The ambition in his heart was enough to swallow the sky and devour the earth. When Dustless attacked him, not only did it not beat back the ambition in his bones, but it attracted the craziest side of a pirate. In order to achieve his goal, he doesn't care even if the whole world is destroyed. This is not. White Zetsu shook his head again. Thinking of the strange trace of Crocodile's mouth in his mind, White Zetsu frowned and said truthfully, the kid seems to be looking for the traces of the Revolutionary Army recently. Maybe this is just an accident, but the cautious White Zetsu still chose to tell Dustless. He always felt that Crocodile's goal was not so simple. An ambitious person suddenly looked for the traces of the Revolutionary Army along the way. He said that it was a lie to enjoy the flowers and the moon. White Zetsu said that this joke was not funny at all. Revolutionary Army? Hearing this, Dustless lowered his head and pondered. There was a hidden light in his eyes. Then he seemed to think of something and his mouth raised a gloomy smile. It was not normal for Crocodile to know the news of Pluton. No one would tell him such important news. Even if the information was leaked, it would not be his turn. In the second half of the Grand Line, there are many big pirates who are stronger than Crocodile. Maybe the news of King of Hell was deliberately leaked to him by the Revolutionary Army. Wu Chen said in a deep voice with a flash of light in his eyes. Although it is just a personal speculation, Dustless is very sure. Only this can explain why Crocodile knows the origin of Pluton, and he has an unclear relationship with the high level inside the Revolutionary Army. It should be impossible. The Revolutionary Army has no reason to leak such important news of Pluton, but Monshidi, Dolag has been controlled by Dustless a few days ago. White Zetsu said with doubts. Dustless shook his head decisively when he heard the words. The Revolutionary Army has a lot of mouths. Dolag is not the only high-level person. It is a mysterious system that is not weaker than Marine. It is just that there are not as many people as Marine. Maybe it's just for the sake of Crocodile's identity. They are looking for Pluton. After all, he is now one of the 7 warlords of the sea, which is more convenient than the Revolutionary Army. Dustless secretly guessed. Judging from the style of the Revolutionary Army, the probability is very high. However, it's not bad to use you to find Lord of Hell. Wu Chen said in a hoarse voice with a vicious smile. Even though Caesar was secretly developing the Pluto, who would care about an unprecedented warship, using the clown Crocodile to find Pluton, until the day Pluton is unearthed, he will rob him of Pluton, and by the way, he will tear crocodile into pieces. Dustless feels that this way of death is quite suitable for him. Chapter 5:17. New World, somewhere on the calm sea. Due to the dominance of the Yonko, few ships dare to go near this area. This area is the exclusive domain of the Yonko, 100-beast Kaido. If other pirate groups slip away from here, there is only one end, and that is to be brutally sunk. Kaido, who is now at the peak of his power, is so arrogant. He himself belongs to the martial arts faction, and he yearns for war and loves war. On the huge warship, Kaido's strong figure is particularly conspicuous. Unlike the past, Kaido is now gloomy, and his whole body is bursting with a chilling aura, and his murderous aura is almost suffocating. In front of him are some shivering crew members. These people are the elites of Kaido's pirate group, and they are all top powerhouses. Even so, in the face of the almost deified Kaido, there is a fear from the soul. Ka ka ka, the sound of bursting suddenly sounded, and the hull was hit by some mysterious energy. The wood chips were like falling snow, and the warship was constantly roaring. Looking up, an invisible wave enveloped the entire ship. Although it was not moving, it gave people the illusion that it was moving. Most of the people were lying on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Their eyes were abnormally dark and empty, losing the color that a normal human should have. They were stunned by some mysterious force. In the center of the deck, Kaido's tall body was obvious. At this moment, he gives people a terrible feeling, like an active volcano that has been dormant for a long time. No one knows when he will suddenly erupt and lead to the consequences of a disaster. Is the news reliable? You should know what the price of lying to me is. Kaido's eyes were more ferocious than a beast's, and he asked suspiciously. Kaido, who had witnessed the rise and fall of the tides for countless years, was very clear about the fleet with many people under his command. There must be spies from other forces involved in it. Not only him, but every large pirate group has other people or secret spies from the government. It is certainly not false information. Even if we have 10 times the courage, we wouldn't dare to lie. A group of people trembled uncontrollably and replied with cold sweat. Everyone's eyes were filled with fear, and they didn't even have the courage to look directly at Kaido. It doesn't seem like he's lying. Seeing this, Kaido nodded in satisfaction. As a captain, he had to maintain a strong deterrence at all times. Although Kaido's appearance gives people the impression that he is a brainless man, in fact, as long as you think about it carefully, a pirate who has spent most of his life on the sea, facing the marine's layers of inescapable net, how can he be a fish in a pond? In the end, Kaido only looked clumsy on the outside, but in reality, he was an extremely meticulous existence. He dares to scheme against me. No, at the same time, he is scheming against the 4 emperors. That Doflamingo really has guts. Kaido raised his thick black eyebrows as he thought to himself. Doflamingo should know the consequences of plotting against the 4 emperors at the same time. Carefully reading the information in his hand, Kaido's face was full of contemplation. The content was about the strange devil fruit during the last election of the Yonko. It was actually a trap set by Doflamingo to deliberately provoke them to fight the Yonko. Have you heard of this Doflamingo? Kaido changed the topic and asked calmly. A group of pirates around Kaido looked at each other and shook their heads. They really didn't pay much attention to this Doflamingo. Or Doflamingo's bounty was insignificant and didn't attract their attention. Recently, he has been in the limelight, robbing Tenryubito everywhere. It seems that he is the focus, but the strange thing is that the marine and the government don't seem to dare to touch him. A pirate who had heard of Doflamingo's deeds explained. The marine doesn't dare to touch him? What kind of backer does that kid have? He dares to have ideas about Tenryubito. Hearing this, Kaido's face was full of surprise and he asked with a little suspicion. Robbing Tenryubito's heavenly gold is enough, but the marine and the government don't dare to catch him. 100-beast Kaido is also familiar with the name of Tenryubito. Looting Tenryubito will attract the attention of the Marine Headquarters Admiral, and Doflamingo's strength can only be regarded as average. The marine and the government don't dare to touch him. It's certainly not because of strength, but other factors. As a result, the problem is worth investigating. The marine and the world government seem to think highly of him. Puzzled, Kaido frowned. A character whose strength is now at the level of an admiral can arouse the scruples of the marine headquarters. After all, the overall combat effectiveness of the marine headquarters can directly confront any Yonko. It was indeed inexcusable for him to have misgivings about a nobody. Where is the source of the information? After reading the words on the intelligence, Kaido asked. Hearing this, the crew below suddenly looked stiff, and they lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at Kaido's fierce eyes, and their bodies twitched uncontrollably. Seeing this scene, Kaido disdainfully smacked his lips, and at the same time, he also knew the source of the intelligence. There are so many traitors, it seems that the internal spies need to be cleaned up. Kaido's eyes flashed with a gloomy cold light, and he looked at the rampant Doflamingo in the intelligence, and he has already sentenced him to death. Doflamingo is not afraid of Tenryubito, and Kaido is not afraid of Tenryubito. Tenryubito is in front of him, and he doesn't want to kill him, but Kaido can be sure of one thing. Doflamingo will be afraid of him. Whether you have plotted against me or not, you must die. 400 Beast Kaido. He doesn't need a reason to clean up other pirates. There are only two choices, surrender or death. Unfortunately, Doflamingo is the one who is going to die. Chapter 518. Mariewa. The imposing buildings in the clouds are looming, like a fairyland on earth, beautiful. Of course, this is just looking at the appearance of Mariewa and ignoring the internal situation. Every day, Mariewa can hear the miserable and painful voices of slaves. The whining of wanting to die makes people have goosebumps all over their body, and the screams of fear reveal unprecedented hatred for Tenryubito. Even so, these slaves living in purgatory can't change the status quo. Mariewa is actually so ugly, with a golden exterior. It's really a foul place that makes people unhappy. In the clouds, a 6 or 7 meter tall figure flashed and appeared. His appearance was extremely ugly, with fangs and a ghost face. He was dressed like a bat and looked extremely strange. Looking closely, it was Gecko Moria who recently joined the Shichibukai. Aware of the miserable and sharp cries for help that came faintly from all around, Gecko Moria was extremely uncomfortable. The hobbies of the Tenryubito, the original inhabitants of Mariewa, are well known. For powerful slaves, especially captains like him, Tenryubito has a unique yearning for them. You guys, the conditions to become Shichibukai can be passed through the marine headquarters. Why do you want to come to Mariewa? Gecko Moria stopped and asked with a low posture. The black-clothed men who led the way beside him obviously didn't buy Gecko Moria's words, but indifferently said, shallow knowledge, Shichibukai is an organization of great pirates of the world government, and the recognition of the marine headquarters is just a formality. Several black-clothed men were as cold as ice, and the disgust in their tone was undisguised. Gecko Moria's old face flashed a fierce killing intent when he heard this, and then he thought of the current situation, and the floating cold light in his eyes flashed away. Now he can only swallow his anger. The pirates of the New World in the past left him alone, and he can't bear it. People under the eaves have to bow their heads. This simple truth, Gecko Moria's life of wandering is exceptionally clear. He is not an idiot, especially now that he is in Mariewa. It is self-evident what will happen if he falls out with the world government. Perhaps, among the slaves tortured by the celestial dragons, there would be one more great bandit called Moonlight Moria. Just thinking about it made him shiver unconsciously. Glancing at the gathering place of the celestial dragons on the right, Gagwang Moria quickened his pace and accelerated toward the place where the Gorosei, the highest power, was located on the left. No matter how terrible the Gorosei is, they are still human, and the twisted heart of the celestial dragons is beyond imagination. Stop. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the clouds. Then, a hazy shadow walked over. Gecko Moria frowned. He felt uncomfortable staying in a place like Mariewa for a second longer, but seeing that the black-clothed men around him had stopped, he had to do as the Romans did and stood silently. After a few breaths, the hazy shadow gradually turned into reality and was reflected in Moonlight Moria's eyes. He was very young and looked very human. The sudden appearance of the figure gave Moonlight Moria such a feeling. Then, he looked at the man in black beside him from the corner of his eyes, and his expression suddenly became gloomy. These black-clothed men's expressions were extremely respectful, and they were even closer than seeing their own father. Such a tender young man, but he made this group of black-clothed men afraid and even panicked. There was only one kind of person in Mariehua who could do this, the celestial dragons, known as the descendant of the Creator. It's really bad luck. With a black face, Gecko Moria's expression was extremely gloomy. Then these black-clothed men also confirmed Gecko Moria's guess, and they bowed respectfully and said, "Louis South, Saint. Dustless is also a celebrity in Mariehua. He can kill the celestial dragons at will and not be punished. The one in front of him is the only one." Slightly nodding, Dustless's eyes fell straight on Gecko Moria's head, and his light eyes flashed. It seems that he is quite interested in him. A group of black-clothed men saw this and hurriedly said, "This is Gecko Moria, who is about to become one of the 7 warlords of the sea, not your slave." Dustless just shrugged when he heard the words, indicating that he didn't care. However, this sentence made Gecko Moria vomit blood, and the denseness was comparable to a shark's fangs. The fat body was trembling with anger. Gecko Moria, who was full of black lines, was about to attack when a sharp and awe-inspiring gaze suddenly fell on his body. Under this sharpness, Gecko Moria was like a deflated ball, calming down in an instant. A sense of absurdity that he had never felt before roared through Gecko Moria's mind. Like a fat lamb, the owner of the gaze was fierce and strong, a prehistoric super creature that was long enough to crush mountains. A gentle bite of the teeth could crush Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria, who was in a cold sweat, chose to respect instinct, and the cold killing intent burst out. There was an inexplicable voice in his heart that warned him that as long as he resisted a little, his blood would splatter on the spot. "It's boring." Shaking his head, Dustless didn't expect to meet this big shot for a walk in the morning. He just looked at Gecko Moria a few more times and lost interest in him, brushing past them as air. If you really choose to be a slave, you won't choose such a flashy thing. Want to be a slave? Sorry, you don't deserve it. Fortunately, you didn't get us killed together, otherwise, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Compared with Gecko Moria, who could still stand firmly, these black-clothed men were even worse. After seeing Dustless disappear, they sat on the ground without any image. Dustless's reputation in Mariehua is actually no different from that of a devil. He gives people the feeling that he is temperamental. Killing you may be just because he is in a bad mood for a while, or he may be like Crocodile, who offended him, and he could laugh it off. Chapter 5:19. Thousands of words surged in Yuegang Moria's heart. He moved his lips, but he chose to shut his mouth. From the eyes of these black-robed men, he read the meaning of rejoicing. The black-robed man's eyes quietly expressed that he should be grateful that he was not valued. The clenched fists loosened, and Yuegang Moria's heart was complicated. There was a silent pain that was difficult to express. He raised his eyes and stared at the disappearing figure. He wanted to retaliate, but he could not summon the strength to resist. "Bastard, am I not even as good as an ant?" Lowering his head, Yuegang Moria roared in anger. Dustless's contemptuous eyes were more uncomfortable than 10 slaps. Even so, he could only endure it. Mariehua rashly attacked the celestial dragons, and the consequences could be imagined. Yuegang Moria was not an idiot. It was not difficult to guess that the person who just passed by was a giant. At least the black-robed man in front of him and the world government were very wary of him. After a moment of silence, several people began to move again. Moria staggered and disappeared into the fog. The red line, like a peerless divine sword, divided the whole world into 2 halves. Dustless on the top of the mountain quietly overlooked the distant sea. His heart was unusually light and comfortable. From his point of view, looking down at the sea below, the sky and sea 100 kilometers away could be seen. There was a feeling of looking down at the small mountains. The oncoming salty sea breeze was nauseating, and it was also mixed with the rotten corpse smell of the Sea King's corpse. It was nauseating. Dustless was just an invisible airwave that separated the disgusting smell. Suddenly, Dustless's eyebrows slightly raised, and his closed eyes were suddenly opened, shooting a deep gaze. White Zetsu, after a while, you seem to like these hide-and-seek games, the inexplicable voice spread out, full of the fluctuations of repulsion. The surrounding mist dispersed. After about a few breaths of time, accompanied by the ka-ka-ka sound of the ground breaking, White Zetsu broke out of the ground. Lord Dustless's perception is as sharp as ever, White Zu exclaimed, his eyes filled with admiration. He had tried his best to conceal his aura and racked his brain for several days to come up with a plan. He did not expect that he would be exposed right under Dustless's nose. Don't use such boring methods in the future. Don't forget who created you. Dustless casually glanced at Bai Zu and said indifferently. He was the one who created White Zetsu, and Dustless was the one who taught White Zetsu the stealth technique. It was impossible to deceive his perception. Hearing this, White Zu did not deny it. He suddenly felt that his thoughts were laughable and ignorant. It was indeed Dustless who had taught him his skills. What is it? Withdrawing his sight, Wu Chen asked calmly. In the absence of a major event, White Zu would not easily come to him. White Zetsu's frivolous look converged and became extremely solemn. His ability allowed him to devour any human corpse. Therefore, his clones could be found all over the world. In other words, his clones could be found on every island. Therefore, the movements of many great pirates are monitored by White Zetsu. The traces of the Kaido pirates in the New World are very strange, and the motives of their targets are unknown. Thinking of the strange movements of the Kaido pirates, White Zetsu reported. In fact, the movements of the Kaido pirates were received by the world's major forces for the first time. No one can ignore the existence of this behemoth that is strong enough to compete with the marine headquarters. Any action of the Kaido pirates affects every move of the world. It is even said that the Yonko, for emperors, has become the symbol of this era. Any of their actions would spread across the entire world like a storm. Isn't he living like a prince in the New World? Wu Chen's eyes rippled as he asked curiously. Since his escape from the town of Kaido, most of the time, he has been entrenched in the New World, enjoying the respect of the world. This is his first amazing move since he became a Yonko, for emperors. The shock brought by this is unimaginable. The Kaido pirates were all dispatched. Such an exaggerated formation, in addition to showing off his own force, also expressed his confidence in destroying the enemy. His courage is not small. Is he not afraid that other, Yonko, for emperors, will take the opportunity to rob his territory? Baigu's mother is very envious of the island that produces sweets under him. Wu Chen touched his clean chin and said. Fighting with Kaido for the island that produces sweets, this reason is too hard to believe. White Zetsu's eyes widened as he expressed his doubts. I'm just guessing. Dustless is too lazy to explain. It sounds like a fantasy, but this is the case. In the past, for the sake of sweets, Big Mom had destroyed many countries and islands. For Big Mama, sweets were everything to her. It's impossible for the whole team to be dispatched. Monitor his target, including the marine. Wu Chen whispered with a stern look in his eyes. Since the town of Kaitorog escaped from the trial of the pirates, the marine headquarters headed by Sengoku has been angry. Now the marines swaggered out, and according to Sengoku's nature, they could only watch him leave. On the other side of Mariehua, as we guessed, the world's strongest creature has been dispatched. In the brightly lit room, the old lady's voice that was full of vigor spread out. 5 figures of different sizes could be clearly seen. Well, Doflamingo, that kid thinks he has great means, but in fact, he is an idiot. The blonde Gorosei sneered, holding a disdainful attitude towards Doflamingo. The other 4 Gorosei also nodded, and they were not interested in Doflamingo. Yes, This time no one can escape from this game, and that man is no exception. Chapter 520. As the highest power in the world, the authority of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, is unquestionable. Their every word, every move, and the slightest movement can lead to great changes in the world. This is the role of absolute power. The world is a chess piece used in their hands to play chess, and the direction of the chess piece is decided by them. Doflamingo. He always thinks that he is the fisherman behind the scenes. In fact, it is just an illusion caused by human nature. He can only blame his vision for being too small and not being able to see the world further away. This is also the inferior nature of human beings. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, with long hair and beard said, his tone full of wisdom. That guy is too confident in his strength. He can already steal things from under our noses. Pedantic. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, who is most familiar with Dustless, despises. From beginning to end, he has been extremely disgusted with Doflamingo. This guy is not strong, but with his own privileges and his superior wisdom, he can play with everyone wantonly. This stupid idea is really laughable, but he doesn't know that Doflamingo is just a puppet pushed to the front, and the ones who really control everything behind the scenes are the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. The devil fruit that caused the Yonko, 4 emperors, to fight over was actually from Mariewa, but the 5 of them deliberately let Doflamingo steal it. Otherwise, with Doflamingo's strength, it would be a fool's dream to steal something from Mariewa. They just took the opportunity to use Doflamingo to provoke the fight between the Yonko, 4 emperors, and now it is the most appropriate to use Kaido's hand to eradicate him. Doflamingo is responsible for the rise and fall of fate, but they can stay out of it, sit on the wall, and choose the most favorable angle to overlook the development of the situation. Kaido is not an idiot. He may not believe our instigation. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, with a scar on his forehead was deeply suspicious. The Yonko, 4 emperors, are not idiots. Each of them is an old fox. They have been rolling on the sea for many years and have become a spirit. Indeed, that man is not an easy person to deal with. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, with a hat on his head also echoed, and the trace of the Kaido pirates this time is really strange. Even if they destroy Doflamingo, it is not worthwhile to dispatch all of them. The strength of the Kaido pirates can compete with the marine headquarters, but the opponent is only Doflamingo. It's too obvious that they are making a fuss over a minor issue. Moreover, by doing so, it was inevitable that some people would have designs on Kaido's islands. There's no need to be surprised. Everything depends on one's effort. I just added some special information to it. The 5 elder stars said with a sinister smile. They were no longer as wise as before. Their eyes were filled with murderous light. I just secretly sent someone to tell 100 Beast Kaido that Doflamingo has the blueprint of Hell King. The other 5 elder stars sucked in a breath of cold air as his voice fell. They stared at the 5 elder stars with their eyes wide open. Their faces were full of astonishment and disbelief. At the same time, they also instantly understood what he meant. It was a top-secret information about ancient weapons. It was reasonable for Kaido to personally take action. Whether the news of Hell King was groundless or there was a reason for it, it was worthy of 100 Beast Kaido to personally take action. For Kaido, one of the 4 emperors who believed in fighting, ancient weapons, which were the ultimate weapons that surpassed human understanding, were exactly what he needed at all costs. With such destructive power, his extreme personality, and his love for war, he would definitely not miss such a good opportunity. In this way, it was reasonable for all of them to dispatch all of them. Not only can we use this opportunity to eliminate Doflamingo, we can even use this opportunity to instigate the grudge between Kaido and Royce South. It's not impossible for us to start a war between them, the golden-haired elder star said with glowing eyes. Not only were the 5 honored stars extremely powerful, but they were also shrewd. Sometimes, it was more interesting to use wisdom to play with a strong enemy that was not weaker than them in the palm of their hands than simply using force to trample them. Outsiders may not know, but they know that Doflamingo is Dustless's lackey. It is not impossible for the master to stand up for his lackey. That is for sure. That man Kaido hates Royce South. I am afraid that he will be the first target to be bombarded by Hell King. The sword-wielding fifth Elder Star sinisterly laughed, his tone carrying a sense of schadenfreude. When Dustless used illusion to trample on Kaido that day, Kaido's eyes were full of hatred towards Dustless. The 5 Elder Stars holding the sword were still vivid in their minds. The shadow of Dustless may have been deeply buried in Kaido's heart, leaving a lingering shadow. One thing is certain. If Royce South does not save him, that idiot Doflamingo will be in trouble. The 5 Elder Stars with blonde hair added. In all fairness, the 5 of them were extremely dissatisfied with the celestial dragons. On the one hand, they used the slogan of absolute justice, and on the other hand, they protected the world's most evil object, the celestial dragons. It was tantamount to slapping their own face. The terror of the 4 emperors was beyond imagination. With Doflamingo's level, he would not even be able to cause a ripple before he was mercilessly killed. Be it in terms of individual strength or the strength of the fleet, the difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Isn't this good? The 5 Elder Stars with long hair and beard said, if the strength of the two sides is maintained at the same level, the direction of the war may be maintained at the same stage. This is not what we want to see. Only when Doflamingo is overwhelmingly defeated, the master who raised him will come out to save this lackey. The other 4 Elder Stars nodded in agreement. This was the situation they wanted to see. No matter who wins or loses, the final winner would be the world government led by them. All in all, the world government led by them would be the final winner. Whether it was Kaido or Doflamingo, they were actually just chess pieces on the surface. The real players behind the scenes were the 5 Honored Stars and Wu Qin. They were just competing in a different way, using each other's wisdom to scheme against each other. Who would win was completely dependent on each other's methods. Chapter 521. For Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, playing with a peerless pirate whose strength is not inferior to their own, like a clown in the palm of their hand, secretly dominating his will and becoming a chess piece of their own side, this is more fulfilling. Without Dustless's interference, there is no doubt that the menacing Kaido pirates will sweep away the Doflamingo pirates, and the two sides are completely incomparable. Of course, this is the case where Dustless is indifferent to the situation, otherwise, the situation would be the other way around. There is a price to pay for running amok, and the price this time is precisely Doflamingo's life, so that the mortal flies will not come to find trouble every day. The bald Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, with a sword waved impatiently. Doflamingo robbed Tenryubitos, heavenly gold, and Mariehua's Tenryubito has put pressure on them many times. This time, if they don't use Kaido's hand to eradicate Doflamingo, I am afraid that there is only one end. Doflamingo will join the Shichibukai. The identity of Tenryubito is too deterrent. Even if Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, wants to destroy Doflamingo, there is nothing they can do. They can only go around in a big circle and help Kaido to kill him. In fact, these plans were originally planned to be perfected. Anyone can join the Shichibukai, but Doflamingo's identity is sensitive, and at the same time, extremely sinister and despicable people can't join. Now Doflamingo, who has not joined the Shichibukai, dares to use his identity to threaten the government and boldly plunder Tenryubito's heavenly gold. If he joins the Shichibukai pirate organization, it is not difficult to imagine that he will become more daring in the future. With the movement of the Kaido pirates, the whole world exploded in an instant, and some people with ulterior motives made things worse. Especially the disappearance of the Akagami, red hair, pirates without warning, the situation became more confusing and intriguing in an instant. There are some strange rumors circulating all over the world, and there are even rumors that other pirates saw the Akagami, red hair, pirates appear and occupy Kaido's original site. As for whether it is true or false, it is unknown. Captain, Red Hair Shanks, that despicable man, looks righteous on the surface, but I didn't expect him to secretly occupy our island, that shameless villain. On the blue sea, as many as dozens of battleships were slowly moving forward. The special skeleton flag showed that it was the Kaido pirates. The huge group of battleships gathered was despairing, no different from the moving mountains on the sea. On the deck of the ship, Kaido, who was dressed in martial attire, was clearly visible. His body was a few meters tall and was covered in wounds. His round eyes gave off a dignified aura, making people not dare to look at him directly. With a wave of his hand, the subordinates behind him who were filled with righteous indignation immediately shut their mouths. The scene suddenly became solemn and quiet. Turning his head, 100-Beast Kaido nodded with satisfaction and smiled. In this pirate group, no one dares to question his right to speak. He is the only dictator. Don't worry about that. Red Hair isn't that kind of man. 100-Beast Kaido said with certainty. He had dealt with Red Hair Shanks before and knew what kind of person he was. Even if Red Hair Shanks really occupies our island, what can he do? It's just a tiny piece of land. We can snatch it back at any time. His majestic voice was filled with an overbearing aura that could swallow the heavens and swallow the earth. Kaido was filled with confidence. There are countless islands on the Grand Line. If he can get something from Doflamingo, even if it costs hundreds of islands, it's not a big deal. With Kaido's movements and the mysterious disappearance of Red Hair Shanks, the whole world began to boil. All the pirate groups and different forces smelled a conspiracy and began to plan their own conspiracy. Damn that Doflamingo, and that Kaido, and that red-haired Shanks, who's coming from behind. In the Marine Headquarters Fleet Admiral office, Fleet Admiral Sengoku's face was blue. The desk that he often used to work on was smashed to pieces by him. It was enough to see how angry he was. Although the goal of these pirates was not the Marine, Sengoku was still very angry. Kaido led the entire fleet to find trouble with Doflamingo, which is equivalent to directly ignoring the existence of the Marine. This is more uncomfortable than openly opposing the Marine. The Marine is so small that they are ignored. How can Sengoku swallow this? Call all the generals above Rear Admiral for an immediate meeting. Kaido is not allowed to ignore us so openly. With a snort, Sengoku ordered the guards outside the door with murderous intent. Dustless of Mariewa also frowned slightly, keenly smelling the smell of conspiracy. For Kaido, Doflamingo is just a small sparrow, not worth mentioning. The route of the Kaido pirates is Doflamingo. It has been invisibly explained that his goal is Doflamingo, who has been in the limelight recently. Now for such a small character, Dustless naturally can't understand. After thinking for a long time, Dustless couldn't think of what Doflamingo had done to offend Kaido. Guru, while thinking about it, the Den Mushi in his arms suddenly rang. The black Den Mushi was used by Dustless to communicate with Doflamingo. Before Dustless could speak, Doflamingo's anxious voice and line of sight could be heard. Kaido, that bastard, looks like he's going to kill me. Come and save me. Hearing this, Dustless raised his eyebrows and his eyes flashed with displeasure. He needs Doflamingo to build Pluton, not to be the captain of the fire brigade. Wherever there is a fire, he will go there to put out the fire. Looking cold, he was about to refuse Doflamingo, but then he remembered Kaido's strange traces, and the words on the tip of his tongue were taken back. Seeing Dustless silent, Doflamingo's face was full of anxiety. People who have experienced Kaido's horror all go to hell. If Dustless abandons him, the only end result will be the same. He will go to hell with those who have been destroyed by Kaido before. In despair, Dustless's voice sounded in the silent Den Mushi. Chapter 522. Doflamingo's heart suddenly thumped, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead uncontrollably. In a trance, he had already guessed what Dustless was going to say, and his heart jumped up and down. Droplets of sweat continuously formed on his temples and dripped down. Even though it was a blazing hot day, Doflamingo still felt the bone-piercing cold wind. His whole body felt like it was soaked in ice-cold water, and he couldn't help but shiver. He had committed countless atrocities, but they were nothing out of the ordinary for Doflamingo. There was only one thing he was afraid of in his life. Helping you solve the big problem of Kaido is not a problem, but he came all the way here to trouble you. I need a reasonable explanation. Dustless's cold voice sounded from the other side of the Den Mushi, and there was no room for negotiation. Only Doflamingo knew the reason. This. If I am killed by Kaido, it won't be good for you. Doflamingo lowered his posture, and there was a hint of threat. He was responsible for monitoring Caesar's creation of Pluto. If he was killed by Kaido, there would be no one who could help Caesar create Pluto. Doflamingo's importance was self-evident. However, Dustless didn't buy it. Doflamingo, a cold voice came from the other side of the Den Mushi, and an invisible killing intent seemed to be transmitted through the Den Mushi. Doflamingo's hair trembled uncontrollably, thinking of Dustless's terrifying power that could fight with Gorosei, 5 elder stars. He couldn't help but mumble. The difference in strength between the two was like heaven and earth. Perhaps Dustless could just move his fingers and easily crush him. It was ridiculous to talk about conditions. Raising his eyes, he saw that the Den Mushi was coldly looking at Doflamingo, and it seemed to be hesitating whether to kill him or not. The higher one's status was, the more afraid one was of death, especially someone like Doflamingo, who still had unfulfilled dreams. It was impossible for him to die so early. Even if he died, he would only be satisfied after ruining this rotten world. I didn't mean to threaten you. Doflamingo quickly explained, and his voice lost its calmness. Being targeted by Kaido is not a dead end. The world is so big that you can completely abandon everything and find an uninhabited island to make a comeback in the future. Of course, this is just a last resort. But if you offend Dustless, you will die even if you escape to the ends of the earth. In the face of Dustless's godlike strength and the White Zetsu army all over the world, even if you have Dustless, you can't escape Dustless's net. In the world, no one can escape Dustless's lock. Confess or not, it's your choice. Without waiting for Doflamingo's reaction, Dustless turned off the Den Mushi indifferently, leaving him to fend for himself. Needless to say, in the end, Doflamingo would obediently beg him to help. A Yonko, 4 emperors, can destroy Doflamingo, let alone 4. Chapter 523. A lot of information poured into Dustless's mind through the Den Mushi. At first, Dustless listened with relish, but in the end, his eyebrows were tightly wrinkled together. Half a day later, Dustless finally figured out the whole story. It turned out that the devil fruit in his house was the one that Doflamingo escaped. What a farce. Dustless was speechless as he shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He didn't expect to come back to this. Seeming to think of something, Dustless suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his mind, and he keenly realized that it was not as simple as he thought. Mariewa has a lot of things, and even if Doflamingo has the means to steal them, he can't easily steal them, let alone retreat. This is extremely unreasonable. After carefully searching for the cause and effect, after a long silence, Dustless vaguely guessed the truth hidden behind the scenes. Judging from the current situation, it should have been the 5 old fellows who did this on purpose. Wu Chen's eyes lit up as he speculated. Although it's just a personal subjective assumption, there is full certainty that the Gorosei deliberately let them go. According to Dustless's estimation, the strength of each of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, is at least at the level of Yonko, 4 emperors. Mariewa is the backyard they have been running for many years, and the probability of them stealing things quietly is 0. Deliberately? Hearing this, Doflamingo suddenly froze, his face was incredulous, and then his face was livid. Doflamingo's eyes flickered incessantly. He had been rolling and crawling on the sea for decades, so he had developed a sharp intellect. He had never guessed in this direction before, and he didn't want to think about the past that had already gone with the wind, because most of them were painful memories. Now in retrospect, he suddenly realized that it was indeed too incredible, and everything went smoothly beyond his imagination. In a heavily guarded place like Mariewa, it is incredible to be able to steal things, and it also smoothly caused a war between the Yonko, 4 emperors. It was okay if he didn't think in this direction before, but now after Dustless's sudden reminder, Doflamingo found that this smoothness was indeed a bit unusual. It was like a script that was meticulously crafted for him, Doflamingo. After a while, Doflamingo gritted his teeth and roared, "Those 5 damned old fellows are truly vicious." The low roar that came out of his throat was like a dying beast struggling, hoarse and full of madness. Doflamingo had clearly guessed the intentions of the 5 elder stars. Using his hand to provoke the Yonko, for emperors, war, causing the pirates to kill each other, making each pirate group suffer heavy losses. By the way, the news of the fruit was exposed to the Kaido pirates through the spies of the government. With Kaido's nature, what would happen next was self-evident. A minor character will always be a minor character. You don't see far enough. Stealing something from the 5 honored stars has made you so pleased that you forgot yourself. Dustless shook his head and sighed when he heard the roar from the Den Den Mushi. Now, Doflamingo is only a young man in his 30s. Compared with Gorosei, 5 elder stars, who has lived for who knows how many years, he is still far behind. However, this didn't mean that everything would be fine. It would make Doflamingo realize how fragile he was. For the time being, don't act rashly. Hide to avoid the wind. After this ordeal, there will definitely be a man named Doflamingo in the position of the 7 warlords of the sea. Wu Chen's eyes flashed and he was sure. The Gorosei, 5 elder stars, can't wait to get rid of Doflamingo because of the constant pressure from Tenryubito. They can't stand the pressure of Tenryubito and they can only use this method. If they can escape safely, Doflamingo will become a Shichibukai. I hope so. He nodded and then hung up the Den Den Mushi. Wisdom may be able to play with any character in the world. If it is comparable to the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, Doflamingo can only look at it and sigh. Just like this variable in front of him, he was foolishly sold by the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. Dustless was too lazy to waste his breath. After all, Doflamingo was just a small character who didn't enter the mainstream. Even I am included in the calculation. Do you want to use Doflamingo to lure me out? Looking down at the building in the distance, Dustless swallowed all the red liquid in the goblet into his lungs, and his face outlined a cold murderous intent. The murderous intent almost materialized out of his body. Ka, the delicate transparent goblet in his hand couldn't withstand the murderous intent. It was covered with a layer of frost, and then countless cracks appeared, and the next second, it turned into messy fragments. The place where Dustless's sight was locked is the residential area of the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. It's just 100 beast Kaido, it's not worth it for me to do it myself. You 5 old guys can use him, I can also use Kaido. Dustless sneered with a strange arc in the corner of his mouth. At the same time, he made up his mind to give the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, an unforgettable lesson. If these restless old men don't teach them a lesson, they will never know what it means to be in pain. In the dark basement, there were several decaying coffins. Judging from the changed quality of the wood, it was obvious that they have been here for many years. I didn't use you in the last world, I didn't expect to use you in this world. The dark space splashed with ripples. Looking at it, it was Dustless who was filled with emotion. On the one hand, he had to deal with Kaido, an unprecedented enemy, and on the other hand, he was determined to teach the Gorosei, 5 elder stars, a lesson. Chapter 524. White Zetsu was an expert in eating corpses. It was too wasteful for him to use powerful corpses to collect information, so he handed them over to Dustless to store and collect secretly. After years of accumulation, the current scene was formed. The ground was filled with rotten coffins, and among them, there were some legendary great bandits. Not only humans, there were also other races, such as the giant race and the fishman race. In short, Dustless's meticulously created flat room was like a race collection museum, containing all kinds of powerful creatures. Unknowingly, Dustless also became a corpse collector. The entire space in the quiet basement was almost filled with all kinds of coffins. They were crowded together, and there was almost no extra space for people to stand. The basement was like an ice cellar in an extremely cold place. Therefore, most of the corpses sleeping here maintained the same appearance as when they were alive. Their bodies were not effectively damaged. After the Edo Tensei, the more perfect the body, the stronger the strength. It's a pity. Looking around, Dustless shook his head slightly. Only a few of these people could see the world again. 99% of them were destined to sleep here forever. Those who could be used in the future were only a few. In that case, let me awaken your sleeping souls. After looking around, Dustless's eyes rippled. He suddenly clasped his hands, and the vigorous chakra in his body began to surge. Buzz buzz buzz, crack crack crack, the ground also began to tremble strangely, and the ice layer in the ice cellar began to crack. Looking over, the coffin that had been lying on the ground without moving suddenly began to rise slowly. Seeing this scene, Dustless's mouth curved into a smile, and the seal of the technique was also completed. He then shouted, "Edo Tensei." The heavy coffin trembled more and more violently. The iron nails used to fix the coffin lid also fell off, emitting a rotting aura. The intact corpse inside was clearly visible. Those 5 old guys are not easy to deal with. After thinking for a while, Dustless's eyes swept to the other coffins. According to Dustless's guess, the strength of the 5 elder stars may be maintained at the same level as the Yonko, on the surface, about the same level as Kaido, but the reality was not so simple. The last time White Zetsu secretly went to spy on the conversation of these 5 old men, he was actually caught alive. If it was not for White Zetsu's cleverness and decisively chose to escape, it was likely that he would have completely fallen. His body may be directly killed by the 5 elder stars. It was Dustless who taught White Zetsu's ability. Even if this kid's skill had not reached the point of perfection, it was reasonable to say that the 5 elder stars was on par with Kaido. It was impossible to perceive his existence, let alone perceive the existence of White Zetsu. Mysterious energy fluctuations suddenly erupted from the coffin, and as Dustless's voice fell, the figures lying in the coffin stood up. After a few seconds, he opened his deathly still eyes. The strange lifeless pupils have no normal human emotions, there is no heartbeat, and their bodies are cold. Even if they don't say it, they are walking dead, just killing machines. Only White Zetsu was left in the cold ice cellar where the corpse was stored. Time flew by. Unknowingly, 7 days seemed to have slipped through the cracks between his fingers. The short 7 days were neither long nor short. In short, many major events had occurred during this period of time. In the face of such a rampant and lawless Kaido pirates, the first to respond was naturally the Marine headquarters in the name of absolute justice. Sengoku has now been promoted to Fleet Admiral, and it is certainly impossible for him to do it himself. This mission is led by the Marine hero, Vice Admiral Garp, who gathers most of the elites to crusade against the Kaido pirates. Secondly, pirates around the world also heard the news, and some pirate groups took the opportunity to occupy Kaido's island and wantonly exploited the ordinary people on the island. The originally quiet world, after such a disturbance, the situation suddenly became strange and unpredictable, and there was no clue. Especially the island that once belonged to Kaido, there was a lot of crying and howling. Somewhere on an island in the New World, it was infinitely close to the predicted location of the Doflamingo pirates. The hot sun was burning the earth, and the temperature was abnormally hot. Kaido also ordered the fleet to stop sailing, showing a rare side of sympathy for his subordinates. He casually found an island with a suitable climate and gave the tired crew a day off. As the leader of the pirate group, strength is important, but the rule of mercy and punishment is to win people's hearts. After all, only when these little brothers live freely, they will work hard. Kaido was well aware of this universal truth. "Captain, that group of clowns dared to provoke us in public, we should immediately send a fleet to turn around and destroy them." Under a 100-meter-high tree, 100 Beast Kaido's huge body was clearly visible. At this moment, he was holding a huge jar in his hands and drinking wine. Next to him was a group of complaining crew members, All of them looked at the newspaper in their hands in shock and anger, and then they tore the newspaper into pieces in anger, their faces full of indignation. A group of clowns in the New World took advantage of their absence to capture all the islands that once belonged to the Kaido pirates. When there is no tiger in the mountain, the monkey is the king. Outrageous. Shut up, as a pirate, you have to be able to pick up and let go. Those small profits, only rats will value them. Because that group of minions only know how to compete for material interests, they are doomed to be short-sighted incompetent wastes for the rest of their lives. Kaido's powerful voice shocked everyone, and the pirates looked at each other and closed their mouths. The right to speak of the Kaido pirates was all in the hands of Kaido alone. However, that group of wastes dared to do things beyond their abilities, which means that they are ready to pay the corresponding price. They dare to provoke the Kaido pirates. No matter where they escape, they will die. Standing up, the soaring Haoshiku haki swept away, and the sky was roaring. The cloudless sky suddenly became gloomy, and a bottomless dark abyss appeared directly over the island. The jagged cracks, as if torn by pure brute force, extended all the way to the distant sky. Chapter 526. Kaido's heart was higher than the sky, his face was full of arrogance, his raging Haoshiku haki shook the earth, and under his majesty, the particles on the ground trembled slightly. A sharp sense of oppression rushed out of his tall body, and the crew on the entire island trembled. In the face of this unprecedented king's wind, they couldn't even think of resisting. The pirate crew in front of Kaido fell to their knees, their faces were pale, and they looked at him in horror, the fear in their eyes was clear. But maybe it was because of Kaido's bad luck, he was used to being lawless, and he didn't expect to be slapped in the face. Boom, a series of cannonballs roared and exploded without warning, leaving scorched black holes on the ground, and fresh soil scattered like flowers, splashing all over the ground with fine particles of soil. The people of the Kaido pirates who had not yet reacted inevitably ate a mouthful of dust. Bastard, which bastard ate the courage of a leopard? The members of the Kaido pirates were furious, staring angrily at the distant sky, which was the direction of the cannonballs. Looking far, a big ship suddenly came into view, with a pink flamingo carved on the bow. There is no doubt that it must be the pirates of Doflamingo. I didn't go to you, but you came to me. Are you scared, Doflamingo? The strong body rippled, and the dust on his body was immediately shaken into powder. 100 Beast Kaido looked at the pirate ship that was constantly firing, and his eyes were full of ridicule. He thought that Doflamingo couldn't wait to die. Looking at the sky, a man with pink feathers, bronze skin, and a ferocious face came directly from the sky. Is that his ability? Looking at the freely moving Doflamingo in the air, Kaido's eyes flashed with surprise. Ability users who could fly were few and far between, as rare as phoenix feathers and Chilan horns. His pupils suddenly widened, and his observation haki expanded without limit, and any changes in the sky were taken into his eyes. After a while, the shock on Kaido's rough old face was replaced by ridicule and sarcasm. The thin line under Doflamingo's feet was exposed to his eyes. Fancy moves, I thought it was a rare ability, but it turned out to be an opportunistic incompetent waste, wasting my love for talent. Kaido curled his lips and said contemptuously. People who had the ability to fly were extremely rare. There were only 5 types of people in the world who had the ability to fly, so one could imagine how rare they were. Originally, he had thought that Doflamingo was one of them, and for some unknown reason, he had set his eyes on him, but he hadn't expected him to be bluffing. A bird dares to soar in the sky, you should know the occasion. Kaido sneered again and again. Cold light gathered in his eyes as he looked at Doflamingo, who was flying over from the sky. His eyes were filled with mockery, and his tyrannical eyes were filled with mockery. Ka, turning around, Kaido snapped a big tree that was as thick as his waist. Then, he easily carried it on his shoulder. His casual and relaxed appearance made people feel a chill run down their spines. How was his shoulder a tree that was more than 10 meters long? It was clearly a newborn baby that was as light as a feather. Only by using force can you get this annoying fly down. His right arm clasped the front side of the tree, and the big hand then surged with a mysterious force. The emerald, vibrant tree instantly turned into a strange dark color. When armament hockey reaches a certain level, it can be wrapped around the weapon. Get down for me. With Kaido's roar, the tree, which was more than 10 meters long, was thrown away by Kaido at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye, and it went straight toward Doflamingo in the sky. This beast, Doflamingo, who was jumping in the sky, saw this and his face was blue, and he waved his hand and shot out countless rays, trying to dismember and crush the whole body of the tree. Clang clang clang, the crisp roar of the steel resounded through the sky, but there were only a few sparks. Not to mention dismembering the armament hockey tree, it was extremely difficult to leave a mark on it. In the blink of an eye, it was close to Doflamingo, and under everyone's stunned gaze, it hit Doflamingo's body. The powerful giant tree easily blasted Doflamingo, and his body fell from a height of tens of meters on the island, smashing a large deep pit on the ground. This bastard, I will not let him go in the future. In the big pit, Doflamingo's face was gloomy, and his body was full of scars and bloodstains everywhere. Looking around, his whole body has entered the state of armament hockey and has become dark. Even so, many of his ribs have been broken, and there are messy bloody traces everywhere on his body. If it hadn't been for armament hockey over the years, maybe he would have been smashed into minced meat. For a time, Doflamingo wanted to tear Kaido's body into pieces and grind his bones to ashes. Then he remembered Kaido's tragic situation soon after, and a grim smile appeared on his face. It's good that you're not dead. It's not easy to control your strength, but you're already so embarrassed with only a few % of my strength. You're really small. The sky suddenly darkened. Doflamingo was stunned. He turned his head and saw that it was Kaido looking down at him. Unlike before, Doflamingo was abnormally calm at this moment. He didn't have the slightest bit of fear, and even had a bit of contempt. Boy, you're looking for death. Seeing Doflamingo sizing him up with disdain, the killing intent in Kaido's eyes began to erupt. He raised his fist high, and in an instant, it turned into a shiny black iron fist. Just as he was about to kill Doflamingo, he thought of the Pluto blueprint and lowered his fist. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and Doflamingo's face was full of arrogance. His unbridled laughter was accompanied by a ripple that resounded between heaven and earth. It contained an indescribable magic that did not dissipate for a long time. Kneel down and kowtow and admit your mistake. Maybe I'll be in a good mood and help you ask him to forgive you once. Chapter 527. Kneel down and kowtow and admit your mistake. Maybe I will be in a good mood and help you ask him to forgive you once. Doflamingo's arrogant laughter fell and the whole scene was dead silent. The members of the Kaido pirates who came were all snoring and their footsteps stopped abruptly. They instinctively retreated and couldn't help but sweat for Doflamingo's madness. Looking at the whole world, only Doflamingo dared to be so arrogant in front of Kaido. Let Kaido kneel down and kowtow and admit his mistake. What a joke. This kind of joke is nothing but a joke. Looking down at the triumphant Doflamingo, the frequency of Kaido's breathing suddenly accelerated, and the heat waves exhaled from his nostrils clamored his anger. His tall body trembled and his eyes were bloodshot and turned scarlet in an instant. The tide-like killing intent swept out like a flood, unstoppable, and the surrounding temperature dropped to the freezing point. After crossing the sea for many years, he is accustomed to the ebb and flow of the tides, and has experienced countless storms and waves. Even a legendary figure like Whitebeard will be 120 times more alert when he sees Kaido. Full of loopholes. Doflamingo's eyes emitted a soul-stirring luster as he looked at the opportunity. Regardless of his injuries, he took advantage of the situation and his tall body moved. An afterimage floated past, and Doflamingo ignored the distance in the blink of an eye. His black iron fist was boiling, and he used all his strength to greet Kaido's lower abdomen. His hatred for Kaido is as deep as the sea, and Doflamingo's hatred for Kaido is too one-sided to describe it as irreconcilable. Clang! The crisp sound of steel spread, and an invisible ripple swayed out. His right arm wrapped in armament hockey twitched uncontrollably, and Doflamingo's face was obviously stiff. Looking up, Doflamingo's full-powered fist landed on Kaido's body, but not even the slightest change appeared. Kaido's calm and coarse face silently mocked Doflamingo's fragility. "Your mouth is powerful. I thought your hands and feet were not bad. Now it seems that I overestimated you, stupid Doflamingo." In the end, Kaido's old face was full of sarcasm. Caw caw caw. Suddenly, a slight burning pain spread all over his body. His thick black eyebrows congealed, and Kaido turned his head. A few sparkling and sharp thin lines were even more terrifying than a treasured sword, cutting the surface of his skin. It was stained with visible blood. Kaido's skin, which could be considered as the surface of a meteorite, was actually cut by this unsightly thin line. "This is the price for underestimating me," Doflamingo said proudly when he saw the slight change in Kaido's face. He enjoyed the feeling of floating in the air. However, before Doflamingo could feel proud of himself, a cold murderous aura locked onto him and sentenced him to death. The entire world had abandoned Doflamingo. "Idiot, you should have heard of my nickname, the world's strongest creature, right? Do you think this kind of small injury will have any effect on me?" His back that was full of bloody scars instantly recovered to its original state. "What goes around comes around. Now, it's time for me to make my move." His eyes widened. Kaido's killing intent was awe-inspiring. His palms clenched into fists, armament hockey followed closely behind, and the huge iron fist blasted out mercilessly. Armament hockey hardening. Boom. Even if he used armament hockey to defend himself, Doflamingo was still easily blown away. The ferocious fist blasted him hundreds of meters away, and the ground also pulled out the same long crack, extending all the way to the distance. B asterisk starred, "Is the gap so big?" Doflamingo said shakily as he lifted his body with great difficulty. His pale face was filled with unwillingness. "I thought it was enough to overestimate you. It seems that I still underestimated you." Gasping for breath, even with armament hockey's defense, his internal organs were instantly dislocated, his ribs were broken, and he was dying. Despite this, Doflamingo was still unusually calm. "Overestimated me? Who do you think you are? With a small fish like you, even if you practice for 20 years, you will still end up the same as today." Looking indifferently at the half-dead Doflamingo, Kaido said disdainfully, "I'll only say it once, the design of the ancient weapon, Pluto, hand it over to me immediately." Kaido tried to hide the excitement in his heart, but in the end, he still roared. Getting the design of the ancient weapon, the goal of conquering the world will be turned from a dream into a reality, and it will be within reach. "You even know about this kind of thing?" Doflamingo was stunned and asked in a bad way. Doflamingo's voice was abnormally hoarse, but he was still very calm. Not only that, but there was also a hint of mockery and complacency in his voice. Doflamingo laughed sinisterly, full of confidence. "Unfortunately, you won't have the chance." Hearing this, Kaido just looked at Doflamingo with an indifferent face, and the corner of his mouth lifted into a sneer. Without turning his head, he sneered in a very contemptuous tone. "The thin thread you use to sew doesn't have any effect on me, and there's no need to avoid it. That kind of small wound can be recovered in just a blink of an eye," Kaido said confidently, his face full of pride. "The strongest creature in the world is not groundless, but the real deal. Any injury can be recovered. If your heart is penetrated, can it be repaired? It's really exciting." A ghostly voice came quietly, and Kaido was suddenly stunned. This mysterious voice gave him a feeling of déjà vu. While Kaido was thinking, an unprecedented force roared behind him. This was a rare moment of panic. This threat that could penetrate through the mountain caused Kaido to feel an enormous threat. Immediately, he tactfully withdrew without any hesitation. However, apparently, Kaido's action was expected, and the golden light bullet that had been waiting for a long time rushed out and instantly surrounded Kaido. Chapter 528. The light bullets that were as dense as rain swept out rapidly. There were tens of thousands of them and they were overwhelming. They were as numerous as the grains of sand in the Ganges River. Due to too many reasons, the entire horizon was dyed in golden yellow. The target of such a shocking number of attacks is only Kaido. Clang clang clang, the crisp roar of steel resounded and spread to every inch of the sky. Without thinking, it can be guessed that Kaido has entered the state of armament hockey to defend against the impact of the light bullets. No matter how strong his body's recovery ability is, he is not an idiot to let this dense light bullet attack. Beaten like this, you are still alive. The space around Doflamingo was distorted, forming a small vortex. Mysterious energy was used from the vortex, and the rotating vortex also expanded. Wuchen flew out from within. He always had those jet black and deep pupils. His pure black eyeballs were even brighter than the pure black agate. Following Dustless's line of sight, Doflamingo was covered in blood. Because of the long time, these blood stains have condensed into scars, and the long and narrow wounds all over the body are very clear. Through Dustless's powerful and abnormal strength, it can be clearly seen that more than 70% of Doflamingo's ribs have been broken. Obviously, Kaido deliberately left him alive, otherwise, Doflamingo would have turned into a pile of meat paste. It seems that the ancestors of your Tang Quixote clan have shown up and blessed your life, Doflamingo. Dustless looked deeply at Doflamingo and joked with a deep meaning. Dustless heard the process of Kaido asking for the Pluto design blueprint. Those 5 damn old guys, in the future, I will kill them first. When he vomited blood, Doflamingo's face was as pale as paper. Without a doubt, the person who told Kaido the top secret news that he has the Pluto design blueprint is undoubtedly the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars. Besides Dustless, only the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, know about the Pluto design blueprint. They want to kill with a borrowed knife. This guy's head may be really sick. Dustless shook his head and sighed, helplessly said. Originally, he could have directly dealt with 100 Beast Kaido, but Doflamingo had to test his own strength to find out how big the gap between him and Kaido is. As a result, he was beaten to this miserable appearance on the verge of death. Ouch! His loud and sonorous voice was filled with endless indignation. A powerful energy ripple erupted from Kaido's body as he was surrounded by the golden light. An unstoppable air wave brewed for a long while before finally erupting. Boom boom boom, the thousands of golden lights were annihilated in an instant. The tyrannical impact annihilated them and turned into a hurricane. A shock wave visible to the naked eye, directly toward Dustless and Doflamingo. Gulp. Seeing this exaggerated scene, Doflamingo couldn't help but hide behind Dustless. Now he has no fighting power. If he is affected by this impact, it is tantamount to stepping directly into the underworld. The Emperor of the New World. The Yonko, 4 emperors, are really not easy to deal with. Dustless felt the level 10 storm coming out, and he sighed. The force that wants to crush him and annihilate him can't be underestimated. At present, except for Big Imam, every other Yonko, 4 emperors, has this kind of Haushiku haki, and their attainments have reached the peak of perfection. Even if Dustless hasn't fought with Big Imam for the time being, he is convinced that the only woman in the Yonko, 4 emperors, also has Haushiku haki, and only Haushiku haki can match their status. It turned out to be you bastard. Kaido glared at Dustless with his eyes wide open. His hoarse voice was accompanied by a continuous eruption of flames. The flowing air became hot and dry for a moment. When Dustless used genjutsu to crush him like an ant, Kaido's heart has been left with an unforgettable shadow. As you can see, it's me. Hearing this, Dustless smiled indifferently, turning a deaf ear to Kaido's murderous aura. Doflamingo looked at Kaido with interest. From his expression and the hostile tone of the two of them, there seemed to be some sort of enmity between them. Kaido's hostile look meant that he must have lost in the end. Go to the ship and wait for me. This battle is no longer something you can get involved in. The majestic lion's roar resounded in the ears of all the members of the Kaido pirates. They looked at each other and ran to the battleship docked on the coast. Seeing the members of the Kaido pirates scattered, Dustless said, "100 Beast Kaido. You want to fight me one-on-one? You're just a loser. This time I will definitely help you." The old face stared fiercely at Dustless, and the eyes of the Kaido falcon fell on Doflamingo. Pointing at him who was only half alive, he said contemptuously, "No wonder this little one dares to rob the celestial dragons, gold of the sky, and no admiral of the marine headquarters came to kill him. It turned out that you connived behind Doflamingo." Hearing this, Doflamingo didn't deny it. He just smiled gloomily and at the same time gave Kaido a "come and hit me" expression. "Damn bug, I will get the design of Pluton and tear you to pieces." With a heavy snort, Kaido no longer paid any attention to Doflamingo. His gaze was fixed on Dustless as he recalled what Shanks had told him about Dustless. "I thought that the red-haired man Shanks was just a joke. Now you're so lawless, and there's no marine to punish you too. In the world, only celestial dragons dare to play with the marine and the government like this. Hey. It turns out that you are not stupid. Hey. Both of us are celestial dragons." A gloomy, complacent, and somewhat surprised laughter came out of Doflamingo's mouth. It seemed that he was very surprised by Kaido's IQ. "You are right. He is indeed the one who protected me behind the scenes. And he is our new boss." You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.